Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the May 16th, 2011 meeting of the Currituck County Board of Commissioners. Tonight we have Reverend Steve Castle of the Moyock United Methodist Church, who is here to deliver the invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Looks like most everyone is already standing, but everybody else will please stand.
Let us pray. You are always with us, Father. We pray this night that you remind us that you are always present. We pray, Lord, that you help us to love as you have loved us. Fill us with compassion and care and concern and tolerance for each other, Lord, as we move through the business of this meeting. We pray, Lord, that you be with our commissioners and that by the power of your Holy Spirit, that you guide them in every decision that they make. Most of all, Lord, we pray that all that we do will be in some way to your glory. And these things we ask in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. At 6 p.m. this evening, we had a work session with some folks to discuss the historic Jarvisburg Colored School and to talk about where we were at and where we were going to be heading in the future to complete that project. Item 1 is approval of agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we approve the agenda, striking item 11.
Motion has been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Number 2 is public comment period. Item 2, public comment period. This is the time to hear comments from the public on items of interest, generally that are not on tonight's agenda. If it's an agenda item, I would wait and ask you to speak when that agenda comes up. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And Mr. McCree, our county attorney, will be our timekeeper. First, we have Deborah Tabor. Please come forward and give your name and address for the record, please, ma'am.
My name is Deborah Tabor, 608 Tulls Creek Road, Moyock, North Carolina. Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioners, most of you know me from events and groups in this area, but tonight I'm a business owner. I come as a concerned citizen. From one end of this county to the other, we are blessed with a beautiful visitor center, county offices. They're extremely pleasant to visit and upscale in aesthetics as well as engineer. Our schools have taken a turn upwards and mirror a county interested in the welfare of our children. Our cooperative extension center and agricultural center is to be admired and shows balance, being in tune with people who live here and their heritage. Our new YMCA will foster good health and programs to enhance the lives of our citizens. Any community can be and is judged by how they take care of their own. How that community places its priorities says as much about its leaders and their values as anything. And as always, that boils down to follow the money. Where the dollar is spent truly defines where the priorities are. And Currituck County has put its support with the people and with their best interest remaining a priority. There is one portion of the county that I feel is being slighted, however. That is our animal population. As a business owner and in the pet industry, I have contact with and hear the views and opinions of Currituck County people. Pets are a part of most households these days. not considered livestock to be put in the yard, but in the home sharing life with the family. And with caring for one's loved pet comes a sense of caring for all pets, not only in our homes, but those walking the streets homeless. Commissioners, the people of Currituck County care about the animals in this county and what happens to them in the long run. The fact is clear, a new shelter is on the way purely because of progress pushing the old one out. From what the general population believes, this was to begin construction very soon. Most feel it is already built, near where the new YMCA is. Well, I tell them, no, there are no concrete plans. All are truly surprised. I have heard recently the construction is being delayed for 3 more years. The economic challenges facing all of us right now has opened a window of opportunity for various projects to move forward with prices lowered and as low as they will go for quite some time because of the most recent construction companies' competitive markets. However, reports show that prices are on the way up. Look on the internet, you'll see that. One of the board members for the Animal Lovers Assistance League has been working with grants to help build a shelter and has found that many are available, waiting to be plucked in the form of green building. Eco-friendly and live animals makes for a winning combination. There are so many generous funds available right now that waiting 3 more years will close the window on. Moving forward now makes complete sense economically and perceptionally as Currituck County moves into the green building and going green ratings. This could be a really good thing for our county, a new green animal shelter. I know budgeting is going on now and may already be set, but as a business owner, I know budgets can contain money that can be adjusted if a need dictates. Other projects that may need funding down the road can be borrowed from and monies relocated to support cost-cutting measures now. Just the design commitment will help move funds into the building of this project. There is a time and a place for everything. There is a place. How about a time being now? Please, if nothing else, just commit to design plans so we can get the grants and funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rachel Yantz. Please come forward. Good evening.
Rachel Yantz, 1709 Wyandotte Street, Kildova Hills. I'm here tonight. I've been recently approached by 2 very charitable organizations, one being Sing for Hunger and the second one being St. Jude's Research Hospital. They've inquired about holding events for their prospective charities here on the Outer Banks. While I was doing research for the perfect spot to hold this type of event, it came to me that, to my attention, that Point Park in Currituck, there on the Sound at Point Harbor, could be available to host such an event. And I was wondering where I should begin on something like this with you guys. If anyone's interested in, working together to put together some charity stuff going on down there and talk about the proceeds, maybe go into some of the green stuff that you have going on in the county as whatever profit the county would make off of it.
Mr. Gannon, do you have any comments?
I would recommend that you talk to Jason Weeks in our Park and Recreation Department. He's responsible for the overall operations of Sound Point Park.
Okay.
And his number, Dan?
I don't know it off the top of my head.
I
You
can
can get it on our
find
website or call my office and more we can get that to you.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, item 3.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
under public comment period, I had asked Miss Embry to put something up on the screen. I would like that to be played now. Is she ready?
Mr. Chairman, we did not get that loaded up for you tonight.
I asked specifically for it to be done tonight.
Yes, sir. It was not loaded up.
Item 3, Kathleen Foreman to present the Governor's Award for Outstanding Volunteer to Virginia Sykes. Vice Chairman Rohr, I'll ask you to join me at the front of the podium, please. I'll let him do the honors.
Okay. Okay. May I begin? Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Kathleen Foreman, and I'm a resident of Idlet and have lived in Currituck County for over 30 years. I am the District Administrator for the Guardian Ad Litem program, which you may or may not know is a children's advocacy agency, and I recruit, train, and supervise volunteers to be advocates for children in the court system. But that's not why I'm here tonight. I'm here wearing a different hat, and that is as the County Coordinator for the Governor's Award for Volunteer Service. The Governor's Award for Volunteer Service program is an important part of the proud history and tradition of volunteerism and community service in our state. For 33 years, the program has honored the true spirit of volunteerism in our state by recognizing individuals, families, groups, and businesses that make a significant contribution to their community through volunteer service. The North Carolina Commission on Volunteerism and Community Service is pleased to announce the recipient of the 2011 Governor's Award for Volunteer Service in Currituck County and to provide a brief description of that person's outstanding service. Our recipient this year in Currituck County is Virginia Sykes. Virginia Lee Sykes, Ginger, as she is known, is the founder and president of Animal Lovers Assistance League, Incorporated, since it was founded in 2005. In addition to her extensive duties, her outstanding accomplishments have been a large increase in animal adoptions, a new Currituck animal shelter that is planned to be built, humane educational outreach, and growth in membership, donors, supporters, and volunteers from just 10 to more than 500 in 5 years. Ginger demonstrates leadership, high energy, passion, and dedication to helping animals. And it is my distinct pleasure, on behalf of the Governor, to present to you the Governor's Award for Volunteer Service. This is to certify that Virginia Sykes is hereby awarded the highest designation of appreciation for distinguished volunteer service to the people and the state of North Carolina, and is to be granted and extended all honors and courtesies provided by this office, entitled thereunto by this certificate of recognition and appreciation, signed by Governor Beverly Perdue. Wait, there's more. There's more. Well, that's just half of it. When Governor Perdue came into office, she began a program called the Governor's Medallion Award, which all 100 counties submit nominations for excellence in volunteerism. But there's only 20 recipients every year who get the Medallion Award. And Ginger is that recipient this year. She was invited to the governor's mansion for a lunch and reception and was congratulated by Governor Perdue herself. And it is really my distinction to present the Governor's Medallion Award to Ginger Sykes.
Thank you.
And she has asked if I will allow her just to say a few words.
Thank you so much.
I can attest that Miss Ginger is she's very focused and very attentive to what she does. And we appreciate her so much, and congratulations to you on these awards. You're certainly more than deserving. And
thank you so much. I really appreciate the kind words.
And while you were at the governor's mansion, did you tell her to send us some more money this way?
Yes, I did.
Then we could get that animal shelter built quicker.
And she also told me and whispered in my ear when she was giving me an award, she said something about she loves her animals and they are a very major part of her family. And so I mentioned back, we need a new animal shelter. So I would like to take a moment, if it's all right with you. I know you have a very long list of people who want to address you this evening, but I would like to thank, this is not an award for one person. This is an award that represents the work of hundreds of volunteers, donors, members, supporters, and they make a difference in the lives of animals. I would especially like to thank our board of directors who nominated me for this, and in particular for all the work behind the scenes and many thankless jobs, Frances Walker. And she is the one that I go to get me straightened out when I am ready to charge forward, and she says, whoa. And so she is a very good influence on me, I think. I would also like to mention that, to my knowledge, this is the first award, the Medallion Award, that has gone to anyone ever, to my knowledge, in animal welfare. And I think that speaks well of the increase that we've had in public support for animals and animal welfare and animal rights. I doubt that any of you, when you were children, had your parents say to you, now, this is what life is about. Go forth, get a job. I don't care if you like the job, but get a job, as long as it pays an income. Go to that job for 8 days, 8 hours a day, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, play with the computer, and go to bed and do the same thing again tomorrow. That's existence. When you have a passion for something and you have a desire to improve the lives of people in your community or animals in your community, whether it's through the being a volunteer in your church, or volunteering at the food pantry, or volunteering for Meals on Wheels or fire department, or whatever it is, that's where you start to be a real citizen of the world and make a difference, because you're not here just to earn the paycheck, go home, sit and watch TV. That's not what it's about, in my opinion. I hope you all here agree with that. And I must say, our commissioners work very hard and long hours on our behalf as citizens of this county. I know, for example, Tuesday, I was attending a budget hearing that you're probably going to hear some results of in the next couple of weeks, and Marion Gilbert there had given up a day of work, of her vacation time at work, to come be a part of that meeting. And I thought that was really showed a lot of interest in the well-being of the citizens of this county. When some of you go in to get a loaf of bread at the supermarket, I imagine that you come out with an earful about, well, you know, we would really like to discuss with you further the Mid-County Bridge, or you sit down to have a hot dinner with your family that you're looking forward to, and the phone rings, and you have 3 phone calls before you can get back to dinner, which is now cold, and your family has finished and they're in the other room, but they've been telling you how important it is not to have a recreational facility in Kerala, perhaps. So you give as well, but the citizens of the county need to fill in the gaps. You can only do so much with funding and projects and all that you do to help the citizens of this county. But the citizens themselves need to step forward, whether it's volunteering at the animal shelter, which we have a whole program starting up this summer of extra curricular activities for volunteers, from taking photographs for the newspaper to walking the dogs to many, many assorted things. We hope you'll come to the shelter, and that program will go into effect June 4th. We're working on it right now. But mainly, whatever your passion is, get involved. Do something for your community. I don't want to a whole group of Republican legislators here or commissioners here, excuse me if I quote a Democrat for a minute, but John F. Kennedy once put it very well, and to paraphrase him, ask not what your county can do for you, but what you can do for your county and the citizens of it. Thank you so much.
Item number 4 is presentation by Jim Harrison, Recovery Innovation for ECBH. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, and Commissioner Etheridge for being a part of the mental health and involved with ECBH. I work for a company by the name of Recovery Innovation. We cover a 19-county catchment area that East Carolina Behavioral Health covers. And our job as Recovery Innovation is we have a group called Outreach Wellness City. And Outreach Wellness City actually, it gives us the opportunity to take recovery education across the 19-county catchment area for persons that have challenges from psychiatric or mental health and or substance use. And one of the ways our company works and that we are able to serve a county is, first of all, you all are funding, of course, East Carolina Behavioral Wealth with the county dollars, and this is our way of being able to come and give back to the county. So we offer these classes. We currently, a little bit of just short history on myself and most people in our company, most of us have lived experiences ourselves. I've had my own substance use, my own psychiatric challenges over the years, did what I had to do in my life to clean up my life, to change my life around and do what I'm supposed to do for myself today. And so that's what we try to do. We work in each county with the Sheriff's Department, Probation and Parole, Task, Social Services, Health Department, any of the private providers. And what we offer is a class that is at no charge to the participant, and we work with these referral sources to actually have people come to the class. And we have a couple of classes that we work with. We currently have a class called WRAP, which is Wellness Recovery Action Plan. It's an 8-week course, 2 hours per session. Currently have it being held at Department of Social Services on Wednesdays from 12:30 to 2:30. And again, it's offering people a program to be able to, learn new living and coping skills. And, my goal is, as I originally came to work for the company last year, I had deer hide in Terrell County. I am a resident of Point Harbor. I actually was asked a couple of months ago if I'd be willing to take over the Albemarle region, going from Currituck over to Gates and Chowan, along with my existing counties. And so my goal as an outreach coordinator for the company is to be able to bring programs like this to Currituck County and to be able to offer them where we have a class for 8 weeks, is to give about a month pause in between, start another 8 weeks, and have it on a repetitious basis. So again, that gives the referral sources within the areas opportunity as they're working with their clients, patients, etc., to be able to help them to find new ways and to learn new living and coping skills. So I promised Gwen I would be this short on time tonight because of the agenda. And I guess I'd like to ask if anybody's got any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer.
Is there any questions from any board members? Hearing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Item 5, public hearing and action, PB 10-03 Swan Beach, Corolla. Request to rezone 37.36 acres from Outer Banks Limited Access Residential RO2 to Conditional District General Business CDGB. The property is located in Swan Beach, tax map 101, 101A, parcels A, B, C, D, 1A, M1, M2, Fruitville Township. My plan for this evening is, Mr. Morrison, you're representing the applicant?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. I will ask you to introduce the folks that will be speaking on the applicant's behalf, and you'll be given whatever time is necessary to present your case. Mr. Simonson, I believe, is representing the opposition. If you would do the same, and then everyone else in the audience, I would ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes as we move this thing forward. And please try not to be repetitious. If it's already been said and been heard, well, then it's been heard. And so I would thank you for adhering to that. Any comments? Okay, with that, I'm going to open the public hearing. Mr. Woody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'm going to do is provide the staff presentation tonight, and that's going to include an overview of the case and the site. I'm going to go over the relationship of this request to the 2006 land use plan. Then, of course, I'm going to end with providing the staff and the planning board's recommendation. So I'll start with, as you mentioned, this is a request to rezone approximately 37 acres from RO2 to conditional district general business. This request was initially filed for in December 22nd, 2009. It went to the Planning Board on February 9th of 2010, and because of a deferral, it's now coming to you at this point, at this juncture in the process. Currently in the Outer Banks area, particularly the off-road area, there's a uniform pattern of Outer Banks limited access residential, and what that means is RO2. I'm just going to call it RO2 from this point forward. That is what the entire off-road area is currently zoned. I'll note that there's two components of this request. You said northern component and a southern. Pretty much the surrounding land use is what you see out there is scattered single-family dwellings. To the west of this, you begin to see some marsh and some of the larger tracts that are undeveloped. And, of course, on the northern piece, adjacent to that north is a tract of land owned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And, again, all of which is zoned RO2. And what I want to do is spend a few minutes on the land use plan and kind of bring some of the policies to your attention. This particular area, the 2006 land use plan, classifies it as limited service. The limited service designation is a MAP classification. In the plan, we have a map that designates one of four categories of land use. Real quickly, the limited service area provides for primarily residential development at low densities. It typically contemplates densities between 1 and 1.5 units per acre, depending on whether service facilities are planned or in place. The limited service itself also allows some limited non-residential uses. However, one thing I want to go a little deeper with is in the land use plan, we also have geographic policies. So in this particular instance, this property or these properties fall under the Currituck sub-area. It's called the Currituck sub-area, but what that means is basically policies for the off-road area. So the Currituck sub-area includes Swan, North Swan, and Currituck. The sub-area policies for this off-road area basically is to allow for very low to medium density residential development without infrastructure or service investments that may stimulate future development or growth. The only services that the land use plan provides for that should be allowed out here at this point are those that protect the health, safety, and public welfare. That particular policy emphasis specifically says that commercial and other convenience services shall not be allowed. There are other individual policies that relate to the off-road area. I'm not going to read all those to you. They're in the plan. But I do want to point out one policy as well. Policy OB6 states that Currituck County shall not permit or encourage the provision of growth-inducing facilities and services to the off-road area, including, for example, commercial services, centralized sewage treatment, and hard surface roads. And that's kind of the policy construct in the land use plan, which applies to this particular area of the county. One other thing I want to note that's not necessarily a policy, but I want to put out there for your knowledge is the off-road area is also designated as a COBRA zone. COBRA zone is short for Coastal Barrier Resources Act. That's enacted by Congress, by the federal government. It basically says that no structure in this area is eligible for federally subsidized flood insurance, and no federal money can be spent in this area that would stimulate development. So there are some limits on the use of federal or other funds in this area. And I'll show some blow-ups of the sites in a second. But I want to get into the kind of the proposed use, what's before you in the application. The applicants propose an inn or cottage suites. For the purposes of the UDO, we have to classify this as a hotel. That's the classification in the UDO. And what the applicants propose is cottage suites that allow for short and extended stay occupancy, including accessory uses. I'm not going to read those, but basically uses that would be accessory to that type of dwelling. And they've also made a proposal for neighborhood village business uses. And I'll get into that in a little more detail. The planned density of the project of the hotel or cottage suites is about 7.82 hotel lodging units per acre. They've clarified that each lodging unit consists of one bedroom. And I'll get into the plan a little more in a second. But that's just kind of an overview of what's before you. Real quickly, I want to do a zoning history because I know this is going to come up tonight. So I want to just kind of get some of the basic zoning information on in front of the board. The Swan Beach subdivision plat was recorded in September of 1969. On that plat, there were several areas that were identified as business areas. Subsequently, and we've had to go back and kind of purge the records in the county office, but what we found is that The official zoning map with amendments dated December 4th, 1973, illustrates these two particular properties as being zoned residential agricultural, RA20, which is basically a residential district. In around that time, there was some commercial zoning on the Outer Banks in the off-road area. It was called an RC district, and that particular node was located at what would have been a terminus or an access point for a causeway or a ferry, had that ever happened. Moving forward, in 1975, the Currituck County Board of Commissioners uniformly zoned the entire off-road area for residential uses only. The R20 district, which was kind of a precursor to the RO2. Carry forward 75 up to 1989, where this property and all of the off-road area was identified as RO2, the current district that still exists on the property and in the RO2 district today. Since the mid-1980s, there have been 9 other commercial zoning requests in the off-road area. Of those 9, they have either been denied or withdrawn. So this will be the 10th request we've had for commercial zoning in the off-road area. What I want to do now that I'm showing kind of a close-up or a zoomed-in view of the plan, I want to go over the proposed zoning conditions. The applicant has chose to file this as a conditional district, general business zoning, and what that allows them to do is, number one, is attach a conceptual plan to the project. So there is some predictability in what they're proposing. You can see it there. And also the conditional zoning option allows applicants to attach conditions to the request, parameters or limits to what they're asking for. And I want to go through those. On May 6, 2011, the applicant modified the zoning conditions, and they're in your staff report, but these are what apply to the properties, in addition to the conceptual plan. One is that it be an inn or lodging units with a maximum density of 294 units or bedrooms, with accessory units or accessory uses such as wellness center, pools, boardwalks. The request condition also says neighborhood village commercial not to exceed 19,200 square feet of ground floor or first floor commercial space. There's also a provision allowed to set up 2 acres to be rented to illegal businesses that are located in the four-wheel drive area. A couple of additional conditions beyond, and those are kind of the uses that are in play through the conditions. Additionally, applicant has specified that wastewater will be provided per county policy. Stormwater will be managed using LID techniques. Parking areas shall not be paved. And finally, the last thing I want to point out is on the plan that went to the planning board in February of 2010, it included a helipad and a fishing pier. Those 2 items have been removed from the request and what's before you tonight. And staff has reviewed this revised request, and consistent with our last recommendation, we are still recommending denial of the request at this time. I want to go through real quickly a couple of our reasons for the denial recommendation. Number one is the project is not consistent with the Corova sub-area policy emphasis. Also not in keeping with the density requirements and the community character requirements of the limited service designation. So again, we feel like it's not consistent with the 2006 land use plan. Additionally, proposed uses and development plan does not promote compatibility between the subject property and adjoining properties. The intensity of the proposed uses and development plan will encourage commercial services in the off-road area. This is in conflict with land use plan policy OB6, which I referenced earlier. A couple of other concerns I want to note. Vehicular access to this remote area of the county is often unpredictable and controlled by environmental conditions. Additionally, this particular part of the beach has, according to Division of Coastal Management, has some of the most significant erosion rates in Currituck County, between 6.5 and 7.5 feet per year. We feel like this can cause some future conflict with access in this area of the county and recreational use of the beach. Additionally, encouraging an increase in daily and weekly visitors who expect public services may contribute to the inability of the county to provide adequate public facilities at this juncture. The property is located in the COBRA zone. I referenced that. The property is in the VE, or the Coastal High Hazard Flood Zone, which may create some concerns. And finally, and I'm not going to read these in detail, it's in your staff report, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has also expressed concern over the potential impacts this project may have to their refuge, which is adjacent and to the north, and that's on the northern piece. The planning board heard this in February of 2010. They did recommend denial of the request based on the staff recommendations, and they specifically cited land use plan policies OB6, CD5, ES8, ES7, and ES6. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Woody?
Mr. Woody, LID technique is that for wastewater?
Yeah, LID means low impact development, and that's a way of managing stormwater. It's a good thing. It's a positive way to manage stormwater in a beach environment.
That would be for stormwater, correct?
That's for stormwater, correct?
Not wastewater.
Not wastewater.
Mr. Woody, Mr. Chairman, do you do an analysis on the 3,300 lots when somebody's building a house up there that has impacts as well?
We don't, because the houses are permitted by right in the UDO. So it's just a building permit process. So no, sir, we don't.
Any further questions for
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Woody?
I have a question for Mr. Woody.
Mr. Etheridge.
Going back to the zoning map that was created in 1974, do you know why the planning department at that time and the commissioners would not have picked up these areas as business blocks?
Based on our analysis, it appears like, and this comes from a lot of the plans, that there was concern over the provision of services and access.
But you don't have a definitive reason. They might have made a mistake and not picked it up.
I can't answer that, no.
I have a
They
question
did
then,
make
Mr. Chairman.
mistakes because I had a parcel that was not zoned correctly as it was indicated, and I had to come back in and correct it. That's all I'm asking. Was it possible they could have made a mistake?
It's possible, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Rohr.
I have a question that I'd like to point out. I think when the Saga Group approached the Board of Commissioners about building a hotel complex in Pine Island, essentially a mistake had been made in zoning, or we'd overlooked it, but it had been ratified by the Board of Commissioners after that fact. And we, in fact, upheld that particular zoning change which occurred because the fact had been overlooked before. So I think we've set a precedent that once we've established the zoning, that we will stand by the zoning that exists with the zoning map.
That is correct.
Any further questions? Hearing none, Mr. Morrison, I will let you proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, it's a pleasure to be here. I think the best way for me to start would be to let you review the architectural renderings by Mr. Flores so you could understand what this project would look like when it was constructed. It's particularly relevant tonight because this is conditional zoning. A long time ago, that used to be called contract zoning and was illegal, but now we have a statute that makes it legal. I would respectfully point out to you that gives you, as Mr. Woody pointed out, some very significant controls. Normally, when zoning takes place and you zone it for a particular classification, any permitted use would be permissible. And the danger is you don't know if the developer will really follow through, and this is what he would build, and you could get something less desirable. By virtue of the conditional zoning statute, and this being a conditional zoning application, you know this is exactly what the property will be used for. Mr. Flores?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners. My name is Mike Flores. I'm a residential designer with offices in Point Harbor. I am responsible for some of the designs here, although not all of them. There's been several groups of several firms, designers and architects that have produced this work. But I am here to describe in general what the developer's intent is for the architecture. Bear with me one second. The development concept for this site calls for the construction of multiple residential scale buildings that vary in overall size and architectural detail. Common thread among the buildings and accessory structures is that the design for each will be derived from an Outer Banks coastal vernacular. The intended look of these buildings is that each one could be built as a standalone structure in some remote part of the beach and look just fine, just as many early structures built on the Outer Banks did. The vernacular style also allows each building to fit into a group or clustered arrangement as well, forming a theme composition of buildings and structures. This concept for the architecture could also describe the look of many buildings built in a number of our early local villages here on the Outer Banks. That's the intent and the heart and soul of the architectural design concept for this development. When built out over time, the end result would be a village that has every appearance of having evolved on this site over a much larger expanse of time. Following is a brief description of each building type as illustrated on the proposed site plan that was up on the board, or is on the board. Starting with the crescent-shaped clusters in the northwest corner, there are two groups of 4 two-bedroom cottages. The next group is the 9 small commercial buildings that are 2,000 to 3,000 square feet in size. This group includes some important community facilities such as a small schoolhouse, the chapel, and a firehouse. Across the street is another group of 5 plus 2 8-bedroom cottages that may be 4,000 to 5,000 square feet in size. These are located next to the wellness center or spa facility. This facility will have a footprint of approximately 5,000 square feet and may be several stories in height. Near the center are 2 larger structures that will house 20 two-bedroom suites in each one. A swimming pool and clubhouse are also located in the center area and will become an important focal point or visual element for the oceanfront portion of the site. Surrounding the center is a group of 16 plus 4 cottage suites buildings. Each of these structures will house 8 to 10 one-bedroom suites. On the south end, we have a string of 4. Flip to the south end. Thank you. We have a string of 4 four-bedroom cottages and a group of 4 commercial buildings that are roughly 2,000 square feet in size. The commercial structures on both the northern and southern sites are intended to be supporting and complementary use facilities for the larger residential use of both sites. The idea is to create, for the most part, a self-contained village where families can spend a week or two and find a full range of activities for everyone, while at the same time providing them with a sense of having visited a place that is truly unique to the Currituck Outer Banks. So, thank you. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Is there any questions for Mr. Flores? Mr. Petrie?
Could you define suite?
I'll defer that to Chip, or the developer, if all right. Suite is 1 bedroom.
But does it have a kitchen area? Does it have like an extended stay? Will it have a kitchen, microwave?
Typically, yes. The suite is going to be a fully, full functioning unit, dwelling unit.
Does that mean it's going to have a microwave, refrigerator, sink, stove, what?
Just bear with me 1 second. We haven't got into the development of the units themselves, so I'm speaking out of turn. Yeah, I would be totally speaking out of turn to go into any detail on the units themselves.
Thank you.
We know the bedroom count, but that's about it. As far as the other details of the floor plans, it just hasn't.
I'm just saying, when you use the word suite, typically when I stay in a suite, it has all the amenities of like an extended stay. So that's
That's
But
that's
we haven't,
also
you
what I-
haven't determined,
Yeah, it's a little more than a bedroom. That's
but we don't know we don't know to what point though, right?
we don't really. We haven't explored that.
Any further questions for Mr. Flores? Hearing none.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to begin by suggesting to you what you probably already know. What you're dealing with tonight is different set of facts, a different development, but it is a problem that has persisted and will persist for some time, and that is this incredible balancing act that you must engage in. We have competing equities, two things that our society values very much. On the one hand is the concept of private property to stimulate commerce. It's at the heart of our capitalist system. Somebody earned the money, somebody took the risk or is willing to take the risk to use their property as they think is in their best interest. On the other hand, the other competing value is the exercise of your police power. We all have got to live together, and we have long since got away from the concept that you can use your property however you want and let the chips fall where they may, even if they fall on your neighbor. An advanced society will no longer tolerate that. But there is respect, still, deep respect for private property. And I'm sure Mr. Simonson will speak to your exercise of the police power, and I will commend you to him. And you have received excellent work from your staff, and I would like to thank them. I've been in this about a week and a half. Some of you have been in this, I started to say since 1968, but Owen is not quite that old. He does give that appearance sometimes. The cheap shots are still permitted in Currituck? Is it? Okay. All right.
I'm a dozen.
Okay. Well, I expect to get a cheap shot from you before the evening is over. The staff has indicated its concerns to you, and I want to thank them. So I've just been in this so very briefly, but the staff, Donna and Ben in particular, have given me a very generous amount of time, very professionally, very courteously, and helped bring me somewhat up to speed. Now, you've heard what the proposal is. Yes, this is a lodging. It's not a hotel like in Kitty Hawk, but yes, it is to rent rooms on the Currituck Outer Banks in a residential setting. Absolutely. And Commissioner Petrie, I suspect, I don't know this for a fact, but I think you would be well-founded to believe that, yes, there will be microwaves and there will be sinks, and sure, that's the kind of thing that will be there. But you've seen what the architectural renderings are, and I want to emphasize this again. This is so very important. This is conditional zoning. Now, you have, in years past, it was contract zoning, and that was illegal. That's not the case anymore. You know what you're going to get, and you can hold the developer to this project. Let me suggest to you that perhaps the first place to start would be to review the staff's analysis. And I assume you have a board packet and you have the staff with you. If you could indulge me, I would like to point out that we're talking about 37.36 acres. And let's go right to the heart of this very well-drawn, thought-out report and go to the staff's recommendation for denial and their reasons for denial. And I would like to respectfully take issue with some of those. If you would look, it would be on page 4 of your report of the staff analysis. There are several paragraphs to this effect, but that it's basically that it's not consistent with the land use plan. It's not consistent with development up there. It's not consistent with the way that other folks have developed their property. First thing I would like to point out to you, you have a land use policy. It is not quite the same thing as an ordinance. It is certainly something that you should give deep attention to, and at some point you would have to say whether this is consistent or not consistent with that policy. But I would like you to understand that the General Assembly gave you enormous deference in that regard. The statute that says you must do that also goes on to say your decision is not reviewable by a court. In other words, it is for you to decide, even more so than the staff. The staff gives you the recommendation, but it's for you to decide whether this is consistent with the plan and the development in this area. And nobody can second guess you. Now, let's go talk about that, though. Let me show you something. I don't think I can get this on the screen, but you all are very familiar with this. Right now, we've got this 37 acres. Okay, this property is going to be developed at some time by somebody in some fashion. If it is developed like this, it is going to have, I believe, 200 some rooms, almost, how many was it, Chip? 290, almost 300 rooms.
4.
Okay. Now, and Ben, I invite you to correct me, but you could build residences on these lots now, right, without any zoning approval. Okay, and you can build large residences, right, if you have enough lots. Okay. What kind of homes, and that's what we call them, do you see on the Currituck Outer Banks now? I'm a native of this part of the world, and we used to refer to them as beach cottages. Go down to the beach and rent a beach cottage. People still use that vernacular. But in the truth of it, let's get multiple families together and go to the beach and rent a beach mansion. Just within miles of this, in the same zoning classification, there is a house that could be built on the same property that I understand has 26 bedrooms and has a dining room that seats 80 people. Now, what is the difference? I'm talking about, I'm not trying to denigrate what someone else built. I'm talking about if this is consistent with what you allow right now. Whether you have one singly owned, therefore easily controlled somebody to account to, one unit, one development, or you have multiple houses like this, and what is the function of these houses? Do people live in them? Is that where they raise their children? Not the big ones. They are, for all intents and purposes right now, and have been since construction, they are hotels. But here is one powerful distinction. They are hotels or motels built to residential building standards. I can remember when I had the pleasure to serve this board, there was often great concern. And the county tried to get involved, but could not because building code is controlled by the state, by the Department of Insurance. This proposal would be safer. It would have to have sprinkler systems, it would have to have firewalls, fire escapes, that kind of thing. But other than that, I would ask you to please search yourself honestly. Is it that you don't want to do this because it's politically unpopular? And that's a legitimate concern. You, after all, are elected by these people. But is it truly because you think it is inconsistent with what is already there? Is it because you think that you will be putting less people up here? By our calculations, if this property was built up with these, what I'll call beach mansions, there will be more people there, and there will be more traffic. But it will be the same business. Folks coming down here to enjoy this glorious Outer Banks and to rent a place for a week. But the old Shakespeare quote about a rose by any other name smells as sweet or perhaps as sour, but that's what is already there now. You've got the safety exception. This will be safer. You got another exception. You're going to have architectural controls on this. You're going to know exactly what it is going to look like. All right, now, the staff also goes along to correctly point out, and a difference in addition to the inconsistent with the neighborhood and the environment and not being consistent with what's already there in your plan, if you look on page 5, they say that it's going to encourage commercial services in the off-road area. Well, I have the same argument. And I would like to suggest to you it's the same truth. What happens if these residences get built with 23 bedrooms or whatever it is? Isn't that going to have the same effect? This will have one advantage, perhaps. There is going to be a convenience store in this village. So folks are not going to have to ride up and down the road on the beach to go back into Corolla to buy ice and beverages and groceries. They'll be able to do that there. Now, if we go ahead and we see the staff is further concerned, and I would call this, with respect to the staff who absolutely did their job, but, one of the expressions that's coming to the vogue now is the nanny state. There seems to be concern that because you cannot get federal insurance here, that the developer should not be allowed to build. Isn't that the developer's wagon to pull? If he's willing to take the risk on that, then that's his business. It may be a poor business decision, but are we going to make that decision for him? Likewise, there are significant erosion rates. Well, I think pretty much anybody knows that on the Currituck Outer Banks, we've got erosion rates. But again, isn't that a decision for the developer to make? It is his property that's at risk. It's his customers or patrons that may not be able to get there. He's the one that may not be able to rebuild in a disaster. Then the staff says that the structure should be built to blend in with the character of the area, taking into consideration height, size, exterior materials, windows, doors, and other related stuff. Well, you've seen what it's going to be. They are going to build like that. And there are height restrictions, and they will have to abide by that. And here's another key point right now. We're talking about rezoning. You're not talking about waiving the requirements of any permits that they will have to get from the state or from the county or the federal government. They're going to have to meet those responsibilities, and if they can't, they don't get to go forward. Now, the staff wanted clarification on what an extended stay meant. Ben, I think you got that. Is that correct? Okay, so, and they address that in italics. I don't think that's it. Then there is number 7, and I'm on page 6. The northern property line is adjacent to the Currituck National Wildlife Refuge or Natural Heritage Area. It talks about the sensitive nature of that land, and that there should be adequate buffers and vegetation. Well, they're going to do that. And also think with me, if you would, please. You have these architectural controls, but why would you not, if you were developing this as a lodge, why would you not want to protect the wildlife refuge? That is an asset. That's going to increase the value of your development. People will want to see that. You're not going to destroy that. It goes on to talk about that no land disturbing activities should occur within the buffer zone. Well, of course, they're not going to do that. And then there's reference from Mr. Hoff, the refuge manager. He was concerned about the helicopter pad. That's gone. He's concerned that there's going to be 2,500 feet of roadway, which will be near the refuge, and that this could cause unpermitted access, trespass onto the refuge. Well, that's pretty much speculation, but certainly I guess it could. But I would ask you to think with me on this too, please. The refuge is protected. It is property owned by the federal government. The federal government does not own property outside the refuge. And if you say that the refuge is here, therefore you can't be on your property near the refuge, well, then the logical question would be, well, is the federal government going to pay me money since I can't be on my property? No. That's the argument here. The refuge has boundaries, and they're not going to be violated. But to extend those boundaries onto this property and say you can't use it, that smacks of taking your property without compensation. There's a concern also by Mr. Hoff, and I quote directly from the staff report, currently the hydrologic flow of subsurface water is not well understood. Okay. And what he's saying is, I don't know if this is going to have any effect on it at all. It may or it may not. Well, that certainly should not, unless when you're telling somebody they can't use their property, I think you should be able to come forward and say, you can't use your property because it's going to harm somebody else's property, not simply say, I don't know what's going on here. Obviously, they're going to have to be tests, they're going to have to be permits granted, and they'll have to comply with the law. There's concern that there's a shallow wetland basins, and that care should be taken in the design of the well field. Okay, well, we'll do that because we got to do that. We got to get a permit. All right, so it comes down then to this. I think the main concern of the staff and the main concern of the folks out here, I would speculate, is there's nothing like this up there now. We don't want it up there now. This is not what we thought we were getting when we bought our property and we moved in. We don't want it changed. We like the way it is. It's beautiful. You are messing with our home. I have great respect for that argument, but I would like to suggest to you that what can happen on that property right now without any zoning is these mini hotels that will put more people on that property, that will be less subject to your control and regulation, that will cause more use of the beach than this development would. I would also like to suggest to you it's already there in other places, that this plan is not inconsistent with what is already going on. Now, this is a political, not a legal decision that you're making tonight. I am not going to get into the issue about how this was zoned, whether it's been rezoned properly, whether they're grandfathered rights, except that I will say, because we're ultimately talking about what you're going to do in a political decision, you want to be fair. I know you can't see this clearly at all, but just trust me, this is what's of record in the Currituck County Courthouse right now. and it's 1968, and it lays out Swan Beach subdivision. And over here are these multiple lots that are listed business. And it's been that way since 1968. And I know there has been the argument about rezoning. But every year from 1968 to 2011, the Currituck County Tax Department has billed this property owner for this property, and it's designated on his tax bill as zoned business. Okay? Now, I'm bringing that up to show that this concept has been here since 1968. It's been in the courthouse since 1968. This is not something new and radical. I would think that you would, understanding the exercise of your police power, as a political decision, you should also take into account the economic benefits or detriments this would bring to the people of Currituck County, the county as a whole. Our projections are that this will generate taxes of $570,000 a year, property tax, and of course it will also generate land use tax, sales tax, and occupancy tax. There will be many jobs created during construction, and then there will be permanent jobs in maintenance and operation. And every effort is going to be made to try and hire locally. This will not put children in the school system, which is a blessing and a curse at the same time. It's wonderful to have the new generations coming up in the county, and that's what makes us grow ultimately, but it's expensive. This will pay for children in the school system. It won't put them there. Now, I would like to conclude by telling you what some of your controls are. There's not going to be any paved roads. You know that. There's not going to be any central sewer system. The amenities are going to be a health center and a convenience store, which will serve the whole community, a church. There will be a corral for wild horses for their rescue and use. All right.
Give the speaker his due, please. Thank you.
I would also hope that when we come to you with a serious proposal, that we could enjoy courtesy that we intend to extend to others. Now, there you're going to have the architectural controls I mentioned, which would be consistent with the area. And I would also note that in your Randall report, it notes that dealt with your tourism. It noted that there are right now, or there were in 2007, 3,300 lodging units, and that the majority of these were rental, and that they had increased, doubled from 2000 to 2007, and that there was a persistent demand, which I assume has been tampered by the economy since then, but that there was a persistent demand for larger homes, more occupancy, and more amenities, and that the vast majority of these lodging units were homes which people didn't live in, but which they rented, which is exactly what we're attempting to do. Now, I think ultimately this does come down to an issue of fairness. Can you distinguish between what these folks want to do and what is already up there and allowable now? Can you say that if I prohibit this development, then there is not going to be extensive development there? of the lodging nature. And I would suggest to you can't. Can you in good faith say, if you allow this to go forward, that it is not unbridled development, that you have exercised your responsibility under your police powers, and that by the controls you have, by the permits they must get, that you have legislated for the health, safety, and welfare of the entire county, including economic developments and economic benefits? I think you finally just must decide, under these restraints and these controls, is there really such a thing as private property anymore? Or has control by the state, even when the necessary issues have been addressed, is the control by the state so extensive to no real purpose other than to serve a purely political design, that private property no longer has any meaning? And I would say, if you deny this, we're getting close to that. All right. I'd be pleased to answer any questions, and if I may, Mr. Chairman, I assume there will be a great many comments in opposition. Since we have the burden, I would request I have a very brief amount of time to respond at the end.
So moved.
Okay. At this point, if anyone has any questions of me.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
The applicant, I'm assuming, is going to build these.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
He's going to be the owner of the property. When these things are built, he's going to continue to own them. He's not going to sell them.
He has no plans to sell them now, but in fairness, I think anything anybody has is always for sale. I know of no intent for him to sell it, but it would be a lack of good faith on my behalf to say that he would not sell it. But what I would suggest to you, though, the sale would still be under these conditions. It would be under this zoning permit. The use could not change.
I understand that, but is the plan, and maybe the applicant can address this, is the plan to build them and then sell them just the way you do a home, or is the plan to build them and continue to own them?
The plan at this point, to my knowledge, I'll be glad to let Mr. Friedman address that, is they're going to build them and own it for the foreseeable future. Mr. Friedman? Chip?
Yes, that is correct. We plan on building it ourselves and keeping it for now. That's correct.
All right. Okay.
I mean, I don't really know what the future brings.
I know, I understand, but I mean, I didn't know if the plan was to build them, sell them the way you do a home.
My sister already owns two buildings on this property, and she's owned those buildings for many years.
Okay.
And it has never been our intent to sell this property. My dad bought it in 1966, and he hadn't sold it since then, so I'm not sure.
I understand. Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Teacher. I think the question he's asking, are the units going to be for sale, or are they going to be for rentals?
No, the units will be for rent, and I think that's addressed in the staff analysis.
Right, but I also asked the question,
would the whole project be sold? Okay, I think the only fair way to answer that, there's no immediate plan for it, but obviously, if somebody came in and offered them a very substantial profit, then they would have to think about that.
Understand.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And I'm learning as I go here. With this being in a COBRA zone, that would mean, Mr. Woody, maybe you can answer this, and in the flood area, financing would be hard to come by if he wanted to sell
it. I don't know that I can answer that accurately.
Okay. I know that I've looked at property up there, and then you can't get financing on it, so that's why I asked.
Yeah, and that may be a legitimate issue, but as I suggested in my comments, that's his burden to bear, not the county's.
I'm just trying to understand the whole process.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Etheridge.
Mr. Pete, are you through?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Woody, if the property is sold, the conditions don't go away. The conditions go with the property?
That is correct.
Perpetuity?
Yes, sir, unless they come back to the board to amend the zoning district.
Okay. Thank you.
I understood that. I did, but it's...
Mr. Dorr.
Mr. Morrison.
Yes, sir.
What kind of car do you drive?
An old one.
Me too. But you don't by any chance drive a Dodge Durango?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay. I have one of those, and I like it, but automobile manufacturers make different types of cars. They even paint them different colors. I assume that the applicant feels there is a market for this particular type of project, for these shorter stay, smaller type homes in this area. Wouldn't you think that would probably be the
Yes, sir. I think they're talking about the same kind of stay that these homes rent for now, a week, 2 weeks, something like that, just like all the other beach homes rent for up there.
Right, and obviously there's some big homes up there, and of course the assumptions that we like one but not the other, I'm not sure is valid. I'm not sure we really like the big homes either. We just can't do anything about those. But the presumption I'm seeing is that these homes, because there probably is an additional market for them, that would be the economic justification for doing it. Would that not lead one to believe that the intent is then to increase the amount of traffic, to increase the usage of these northern beaches by the provision of this different type of residential structure as opposed to the big homes that are already up there?
The intent would be, you're correct, sir, the intent obviously would be for people to go and patronize this business, and they will have to access it by vehicle, yes.
I think that was the point I was trying to make, that the mix of the residential nature obviously would probably be more popular than every house up there looking the same. And that's really the thing that I have an issue with as far as the OB6 guideline that we have, is the fact that the land use plan specifically asks us not to do anything to increase business up there. I mean, there's some things we can't do anything about. The zoning by right we can't do anything about. But I don't know that we're really interested in accommodating a mix of product that would, by its very nature, be designed to increase the amount of use of the property.
That is a legitimate concern, Commissioner, if I may respond, though.
Right.
What my point is that whether you allow this or not is not going to ultimately resolve that, because you can build other kinds of houses that are going to attract, I mean, the property is going to be developed ultimately in some manner and by somebody, and the traffic is going to go there.
Well, by the same likelihood that, that if General Motors only built one type of vehicle, their market probably would not be as robust as it is with the mix that they make. That by not encouraging, by having this mix, we would in fact accomplish what that land use plan guideline was.
Well, my purpose is not to argue with you. Your points are well taken, and I hope you understand my response.
Thank you.
And I thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Any further questions for Mr. Morrison? Hearing none, Mr. Morrison, do you have anyone else that you want to introduce to speak?
Not at this time, I don't think. Thank you.
Okay, so you're finished with your presentation other than rebuttal?
Rebuttal, that would be correct.
Mr. Simons. I know I am killing your name, and I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm very accustomed to it, so I don't take offense to it. My name is Lars Simonson, but Simonson is fine, too. I'm an attorney in Edenton, North Carolina, and I'm here on behalf of the Swan Beach Property Owners Association, the North Swan Beach Property Owners Association, and a handful of the residents in those areas. My clients are opposed to Swan Beach Corolla's proposal, and there are many reasons for that, and I know you've got a long night ahead of you, and I'm going to try to keep my comments short, but this is the opportunity that my clients have to make their points, and so I would like to make those fully. One thing that I would like to point out about Swan Beach Corolla, it was formed in 2000. It is a Virginia corporation, and Swan Beach Corolla LLC acquired the bulk of this, I think 28 point some acres of the 36 in April 2002 for $960,000. I think that's an important consideration here. There's some talk here about private property rights and that they're being denied the right to use their property as they see fit. They bought this property for a price that reflected the existing restrictions. They didn't buy this property at a price that reflected a right to build hotels on it. They bought it at a price that reflected what the ordinances were and what impact it had on the property. So you're not taking anything away from them by enforcing the existing ordinances. They bought it under those same circumstances. As a Virginia LLC, they are a foreign LLC under North Carolina law, and they are required to have a certificate of authority to do business in the state of North Carolina. They do not have a certificate of authority to do business in this state, and that's easily checked by checking the North Carolina Secretary of State's website. The problem with not having a certificate of authority, there's been mention, and perhaps not so much leading up to this meeting, but I know there was some mention of it the last time the board was faced with the applicant's proposal. There was some discussion about the fact that there might be litigation. Without a certificate of authority, they don't have the right to press their claims in North Carolina court. So I would say any threats that they make to bring this body to court for making its decision, for exercising its discretion, for carrying out your duty, it's an empty threat until they obtain a certificate of authority. But they've not done what the law requires of them, something very simple, something very basic. I'd also like to address something that Mr. Morrison said. He said that this is a political decision, not a legal decision, and I entirely disagree with that. This is a legal decision. It is not merely political. There are laws that govern the county's conduct, the Board of Commissioners, and you have to follow those laws. And the law that applies in this circumstance is very clear. I've sent each of you 2 letters that I prepared, and they're based on extensive research, and based on that research, there are very clear rules that have to be followed in ruling on this request. And if you don't follow those rules, you break the law. You violate your duty. You step outside of your statutory authority. And you've probably heard the term statutory authority before. You all, the counties have been delegated authority by the North Carolina legislature, and you have to act within the bounds of that authority. The applicant is requesting basically conditional use zoning. What they're saying is change the zoning to allow us to do what we want to do, but impose some conditions on us. We'll give you some control over what we want to do if in exchange you'll allow us essentially what we want to do. And it's true, there is statutory authority for conditional use zoning, but there's a point at which conditional use zoning becomes illegal spot zoning. And there are some standards and guidelines that the North Carolina Supreme Court has outlined to help boards like you determine at what point you cross over from proper conditional use zoning into illegal spot zoning. The applicant's request is way over that line. This is not a true conditional use zoning. This is absolutely, positively illegal spot zoning. And I've gone into quite a bit of detail in my letter and cited the case law that is applicable. The main case is North Carolina Supreme Court case from 1972, and I think the age of it means something too. I mean, this law is not some new nanny state law. This is well-established law, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the nanny state issue later, but the Supreme Court has identified spot zoning as a zoning ordinance or amendment which singles out and reclassifies a relatively small tract owned by a single person and surrounded by a much larger area uniformly zoned so as to impose upon the small tract greater restrictions than those imposed upon the larger area, or so as to relieve the small tract from restrictions to which the rest of the area is subjected. That is called spot zoning, and that's exactly the situation here. They're asking you to take out 37 point some acres out of the thousands of acres in this area and isolate it and say, we're not going to impose these same rules that everybody else has to follow. We're going to make special rules for you. And in this case, we're going to ease up on you. We're going to allow you to do things that nobody else is allowed to do. They're asking you to give them special privilege. They're not asking you to not be nannies. They're asking you to be nannies for everybody else, but not us. So I think you need to consider the situation here. This is spot zoning. Not all spot zoning is illegal, but in order for it to be legal, there must be a rational basis for the zoning, and the Supreme Court has outlined a bunch of factors that it considers, that the courts consider in determining whether or not a rational basis exists. One is the size of the tract in question, and I'll just read a quote from the courts. Significant disturbances such as the rezoning of a parcel in an old and well-established residential district to a commercial or industrial district would clearly be objectionable. That's exactly what they're asking for here. Out of this gigantic residential district, they're asking that you take a very small parcel, 30-some acres, and rezone it to a commercial district. That is clearly objectionable. The Supreme Court says so. And these residential districts have been in existence for almost 40 years. This is not a new thing that has been imposed, and they're asking to have some mercy. Don't impose these new restrictions on us. These residential districts existed long before Swan Beach Corolla LLC existed, 1970-something versus 2000. The other factor that the court says will be considered in determining whether there's a rational basis for spot zoning is the compatibility of the disputed zoning area with the disputed zoning action with an existing comprehensive zoning plan. You have a comprehensive zoning plan. It's the land use plan. And yes, it is a policy, but that's how these plans are. They're policies. They're not ordinances, they're not laws that say you must do this. You do have the discretion to ignore the policy. It's a bad idea, because otherwise, why do you have the policy? You've also got experts on your own staff. Mr. Woody and his staff are the experts in determining what fits within the land use plan. The land use plan is not a document that is lightly entered into. Prior boards have spent lots and lots of time and effort and mental energy to come up with a plan that makes sense for Currituck County. And if the applicant's proposal is inconsistent with that plan, there's a reason why that plan is in place, and there's a very strong indicator that perhaps this proposal by the applicant is not a good idea. It's not appropriate for Currituck County. And I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail because Mr. Woody already outlined the many ways that this plan is inconsistent. This proposal is inconsistent with the land use plan. But I would like to point out on the flood insurance issue. There is a reason beyond helping the individual, and there is a reason why it may not be a good idea to allow a developer to take that risk. And the reason is if Swan Beach Corolla builds this resort, whatever you'd like to call it, and a storm comes along, a flood comes along and damages it, destroys it, they don't have the flood insurance to clean up the mess. and Swan Beach Corolla disappears, they declare bankruptcy or whatever, and you're stuck with the mess. If they had flood insurance, that mess would be insured. But instead, without the insurance, you stand the real possibility that the mess becomes the communities. It becomes the counties. And so there is a reason beyond just allowing the developer to take that risk. It's about protection of the community. And that's what this is all about, is about protecting the county and protecting the community. The proposed development violates the letter and the spirit and the intent of the land use plan. There's no way around it. So that second factor, the compatibility of the disputing zoning action with an existing comprehensive plan. You flunked number 1, you flunked number 2, so we move on to number 3. Also, I would point out that under North Carolina law, if you ignore the planning board's recommendation and you ignore the land use plan, you as a board are required under NCGS 153A-341 to make a finding that this development is consistent with the land use plan. You have to ignore everything to make that finding. But by statute, you have to, and you have to find that the proposal is in the public interest. Can you honestly do that? I don't think you can honestly do that, but the statutes require you to do so. The third factor that the courts consider is the benefits and detriments resulting from the zoning action for the owner of the newly zoned property, his neighbors, and the surrounding community. And to some extent, this is sort of the democracy standard. And I call it the democracy standard because the court says it matters whether the project has community support or whether it has broad community objections. And what I would like to do is I'd like to ask the people here, those of you who are already standing, raise your hand if you object to this, and those of you who are sitting, stand up if you object to this proposal. And I want to do that because it demonstrates this democracy issue. And now I'd like you to sit back down again and be quiet. Thank you. It demonstrates this democracy element. There's one landowner who wants this, and there are, I don't know how many are here, 100 or more. These are the ones that came all this way to attend the meeting. I can assure you that there are a whole lot more that are not attending this meeting who object. And they object for good reasons. They don't object for selfish, improper reasons. They object because this is a community. And it's a community that they treasure. And it's a community that they want to stay a community. And Mr. Friedman and Swan Beach Corolla LLC are welcome to be a part of that community. But they bought this property knowing what the community was like and knowing that there was a zoning ordinance that protected the character of the community. And all we're asking is enforce the zoning ordinance, protect the character of the community. There's a lot of democracy here behind that request. It's not a selfish thing. It's not a, I got mine, now I don't want you to get yours. This is zoning, this is planning, it's managed development. It's a good thing. It's not a nanny state. Basically, the zoning request here would provide special privileges to Swan Beach LLC, special privileges that didn't exist when they bought that property. You would be granting them a tremendous economic benefit. They paid $960,000 for a piece of property that had limited uses, and you're going to lift those limits, and all of a sudden, by the fiat of this board, their property is going to explode in value. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it is a matter of preserving the character of the community. That's what zoning is all about. And all my clients are asking for, all the community is asking you to do, is to protect them. Protect them, protect their community, protect the character of the community that they have all lived in, and they have all, essentially abided by the rules governing their community. And I'm going to read you one more quote from, I'll probably read you more than one more, but on this standard, the North Carolina Supreme Court says that the true vice of illegal spot zoning is in its inevitable effect of granting a discriminatory benefit to one landowner and a corresponding detriment to the neighbors or the community without adequate public advantage or justification. Accordingly, while spot zoning, which creates a great benefit for the owner of the rezoned property with only an accompanying detriment and no accompanying benefit to the community or to the public interest, may well be illegal, spot zoning, which provides a service needed in the community in addition to benefiting the landowner, may be proper. What benefit to the community did you hear from the applicant? They're going to get a convenience store. Hallelujah. They don't have a convenience store now, and they still love their community. There aren't people moving out of Swan Beach and North Swan Beach because, daggone it, we don't have a convenience store. They're doing just fine without it. That's not the kind of public benefit that would offset the tremendous discriminatory benefit that you are granting if you were to rule in favor of their request, that you would be granting to Swan Beach LLC. There are a lot of detriments that go along with it, too, and some of the questions that have been asked show that you have the recognition of those detriments. Access is a problem. You can't provide a rescue. It's going to be hard. If somebody has a heart attack in the hot tub, are you going to be able to provide the county services to get that person to a hospital? There are no paved roads. There are not going to be paved roads. If the hotel catches on fire, are you going to be able to send the needed resources to deal with that problem? I mean, these are all county services that are going to be stretched to the limit. And you're going to have to make additional investments it's going to be costly to the county to be able to provide the services that these tourists are going to expect. When they go there, if they have a heart attack, they're going to expect a rescue squad, an ambulance to show up within 10 minutes, and it ain't going to happen. If the hotel catches on fire, they're going to want somebody down there with a trampoline to catch them when they jump out the window, and it ain't going to happen. So these are all things that have to be considered. And furthermore, it would open the floodgates to similar requests. There have been 9 requests since the 1980s. They've all been denied for good reason. This one should be denied as well. The fourth standard that the court looks at, the fourth characteristic, is the relationship between the uses envisioned under the new zoning and the uses currently present in adjacent tracts. And a big issue was made of these gigantic cottages. But those are fundamentally different than an inn, than these inns, these hotel rooms with commercial services and spas and shopping areas and this planned development that Swan Beach Corolla is proposing. When people rent these cottages, most of the time it's big families, and they go and they stay in their houses and they enjoy the community and the area. But they don't go to the convenience store, and they don't go to the spa, and they don't go to the hot tub, and it is typically people who know each other and are related to each other. It's not individual groups, each renting their own suite, all going in different directions and hurrying and scurrying about. There is a fundamental difference between those. What there is now is very different than what they are proposing. They've also raised the issue of vested rights. There was mention made of the tax treatment. That doesn't give them any rights. The fact that their tax bill might say business on it doesn't give them any rights. There's no law that says that gives them anything. There's no cases that say it gives them anything. It doesn't give them anything. If they didn't like their bill saying business on it, they should have called the tax office and asked that it be changed. That was their remedy. They've chosen not to exercise that remedy. Their remedy is not to come to you and say, allow us to do what our tax bill says on it. That's not a vested right. The fact that there was a 1969 plat recorded. There are these little areas here that say business area. North Carolina law does recognize vested rights. And there's one very, very important thing about vested rights. NCGS 153A-344.1c talks about how rights become vested. And one of the things that it calls for is a site-specific development plan or a phase development plan. And that's kind of what they're saying here. This subdivision plat, they're calling a site plan, a site-specific development plan. But what they have not shared with you is the definition of site-specific development plan. It's defined in 153A-344.1, and it says, such a plan shall include the approximate boundaries of the site, significant topographical and other natural features affecting development of the site, the approximate location on the site of the proposed buildings, structures, and other improvements, the approximate dimensions, including height of the proposed buildings and other structures, and the approximate location of all existing proposed infrastructure on the site, including water, sewer, roads, and pedestrian walkways. There's none of that on that plat. There's a big difference between a subdivision plat that has an empty block that says business. That's what they've got. It's not a site-specific development plan. That does not give them any vested right. That argument won't get them anywhere. It shouldn't get them anywhere here. It won't get them anywhere in court. Even if they did have vested rights because of a 1969 plat, nobody's arguing that these ordinances have been amended over time. And if they thought that their vested rights had been implicated by changes in the ordinances, they had a time period within which they had to challenge those new ordinances. They had 2 months, and they're too late. 2 months passed sometime in November of 1974. They're too late. So there's also been mention of contract zoning. Contract zoning is still illegal. Conditional use zoning and contract zoning are two different things. Conditional use zoning is maybe perhaps a legal form of contract zoning, but to say that the county owes them obligations because the tax bill says business and their plat says business, and maybe even the county commissioners back in 1969 made them write business in those little squares. And they're now saying, because you made us do that, you can't change the rules. We got a deal. That's contract zoning, and it is illegal. That argument isn't going to go anywhere in court but down the tubes. Finally, now they're making an argument about discriminatory or selective enforcement. They're saying you're letting some people do some things that are wrong. You should let us do what's wrong. You've got these accessory uses, these home occupations, and admittedly, some of the people who are operating under the home occupation exemption are violating the rules. And the county is taking appropriate enforcement action to address that. But there's nobody who has built a hotel as a home occupation. There's nobody who's built a convenience store as a home occupation. There are people who might have too many vehicles in their yard. They might have some signs of business, signs of business. I mean, piles of building materials or heavy equipment, and they shouldn't. The enforcement should be taken, but there's a big difference between what the courts call mere laxity in enforcement and discrimination or selective enforcement. There is that what they would have to prove to show discrimination is an unequal hand and an evil intent. They'd have to show that there was a plan. We're going to let them do this because we like them, but we're not going to let them do that because we don't like them. That's not the case here. Some of these violations passed unnoticed. They are now noticed, and appropriate action is being taken. This is not a matter of existing residents taking the position that we got ours and we want to keep them out so they don't get theirs. Another Supreme Court quote, North Carolina Supreme Court, "The whole concept of zoning implies a restriction upon the owner's right to use a specific tract for a use profitable to him, but detrimental to the value of other properties in the area, thus promoting the most appropriate use of land throughout the municipality considered as a whole." Not nanny state, but protecting the community as a whole. To promote the appropriate use of land throughout the area. And that's what these residents are asking you to do. Keep doing what has already been done. Protect the area. Enforce the ordinances. Keep them in place. Don't change it, because what you've got in place is working. And not only is it working, there's a lot of thought behind it. There's more than 40 years of thought behind all of this. And are you going to change that because one landowner wants you to? Are you going to throw out all of this good thought and by your predecessors that obviously the citizens enjoy? They are pleased with what currently exists. They don't want it changed, and they deserve to be protected. The mention of competing equities, police power versus capitalism, that, by exercising your police power, you're denying someone their private property rights. Their private property rights were in place when they bought this property. When they bought this property, they knew what they were getting. Now they're asking you to give them more. Give them more. Don't think about what the others have already got. Give us more. Your police power as commissioners, part of what your duty is to protect the property rights of the community, not protect the property rights of a single individual to the exclusion and detriment of everybody else. It's all about the county. It's not all about Swan Beach Corolla LLC. When I'm advising my clients, what I tell them is that if you are facing a decision that is going to land you in court, no matter what you do, then think about what's right. Whether or not you're going to end up in court, think about what's right. But particularly when your decision is going to be tested by trial, and you're going to have to explain yourself to a judge, you should make the decision that puts you on the side of what is right and on the side of what's going to win. I mean, we all love to win. We all hate to lose. Swan Beach Corolla LLC has the might, but they're not on the side of what is right for Currituck County or Swan Beach or North Swan Beach. We're asking you to do what is right, and what is right is keep doing what has been done since the early 70s. Protect this community. And that's all I have to say. I've got some other speakers to introduce, but I'd like to open the floor for questions if anyone has any.
Any questions? Hearing none.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce a couple of speakers. The next folks will be Kim Hoy, who is the spokesperson for the Corova area, Elizabeth White, who is the president of the Swan Beach Property Owners Association, and I'm just going to read them off and then you pull them up as they finish. Deborah Iannucci, Mike Long, and Jane Overstreet, who are all residents of the Swan Beach area. Lynn Wilson, who is the president of the North Swan Beach Property Owners Association. J.P. Perrone, who is a representative of the Volunteer Fire Station. Kim Pedrava, and forgive me if I've pronounced that incorrectly, she's a board member of the South Beach Property Owners Association. And then last but not least, a consultant that is working with my clients and with me, Mr. Herbert Curry, who is with the World Bank. Thank you very much.
I would ask if you would allow us to take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll get started with the rest of it. Excuse me, if we could get everyone to take their seats again, we'll get started. We'll call the meeting back to order. I think we had signed up Mrs. Kimberly Hoy, and I think she has a request, and if the board will indulge us, I would appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Idlet, Commissioners, I respectfully request that Sarah McClellan, who is a fourth grader, is here to speak tonight. I request that she be allowed to speak.
The microphone.
I'm sorry. I respectfully request that Sarah McClellan, who is a fourth grader, need to be allowed to come and speak before me. She needs to get home and go to bed, so if you would allow her to go ahead of me, I would appreciate it.
Can I go with her?
Me too.
Only if we can.
I will take the chair's prerogative on that, and yes, ma'am, please have that happen. Thank you. Good evening, young lady. How are you?
Good.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, my name is Sarah McClellan, and I am a fourth grader at Moayak Elementary School. County Commissioner Board members, thank you for letting me talk to you briefly about why I think the colonial Spanish Mustang's habitat should be saved. First of all, we fought to make this horse our state horse, and now people want to take the horse's habitat away. Most people that come to the beach want to watch the horses in their natural environment. If the hotel was built, Corolla's visitor population would go down quite a bit because the horses would soon die out. The horses could go extinct because they won't have enough space to run around in. These horses need land to roam freely. This place needs to include food for the horses and water to wade in. I feel that we should do everything we can to save these beautiful creatures from extinction. Thanks again for letting me show you my point of view and why the horse's habitat should be saved.
Thank you very much. That was very nice. Okay, now we have Mrs. Kimberly Hoy. Please, speakers, if you would, please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, so we're not here until 3 o'clock in the morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kimberly Hoy. I reside at 2245 Sam Fiddler Road, Corova Beach. Good evening. Before I begin, I would like to mention we will be addressing some of what Laura Simonson points with specifics. We respectfully ask for your patience and indulgence while we go through this process. Thank you. The off-road community thanks you for listening to our concerns tonight and over the past few weeks and years on this very topic. We were heartened to know that each of you also believe that commercial zoning in the off-road area is inappropriate, as each of you noted during your respective election campaigns and in visits to our community. As you know, the majority of residents and property owners in the off-road area are against commercial zoning in the off-road and in Swan Beach specifically. We sent hundreds of emails to your county accounts. Unfortunately, some of these were considered spam and did not get to you. We also have well over 1,000 signatures on petitions, including signatures from tourists that oppose commercial in the off-road. The remoteness and non-commercial nature of the off-road is why they are here, not despite it. It is why we are here, not despite it. You recently received a document, Voices of Currituck. In this document, it is wonderful to note the appreciation that everyone has for the natural, undeveloped areas, especially the children. This area represents a unique, one-of-a-kind experience, very different from their geographic environments. They come here and escape for a week to this magical, pristine, clearly one-of-a-kind place. Commercial zoning would ruin this opportunity and enjoyment for these kids and families alike. There is equally an overwhelming opposition to this proposal from the residents, including the mainland, Gibbs Woods, and Knott's Island, property owners and tourists. As a community, we ask, is this request reasonable? As our lawyer has very well defined in his letter to the county that you have received, this proposal is not reasonable, is unwarranted, is not in the best interests of the citizens of Currituck County. If this rezoning request is approved, we will see the results that are opposite of those intended by the power of zoning given to the county. The underlined parts on the screen are all elements that will not be provided if this residential zoning is changed to conditional general business. In fact, the opposite will occur. In addition, the proposed rezoning is not in keeping with the character of our community. It is not reasonable to change from one of the most restrictive zoning classifications, single-family home residential, in one of the most restrictive districts, RO2, with large conservation areas, to general business, one of the least restrictive commercial districts in the entire county. In fact, it would confer special privileges to the petitioner that are not enjoyed by the rest of the citizens and property owners in the off-road. There is no harm to the owner if the request is denied, as he has the right to use his land in keeping with the residential zoning that has been in place for over 30 years and, in fact, has already built 2 multi-million-dollar homes on the property. I want to clarify that what we are talking about is a rezoning request from residential to general business. The attempts to mask this development as residential units, oceanfront duplexes with several kitchens, a gated community, or a cluster of land-saving cottages are misleading, untrue, bordering on insulting, and manipulative. That type of request does not require a zoning change to general business. We have also heard this will be affordable housing for people to come to the beach. There is no condition that can be placed on the property to limit the rates that the petitioner or whomever he sells the land to can charge. There is no condition that can be placed on the property to guarantee that the property is not flipped for his sole gain upon rezoning. The only guarantee is commercial and heavy density out of keeping with the character of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoy.
Any questions?
Any questions for Mrs. Hoy? Hearing no questions, next we have Miss Elizabeth White. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth White, 1686 Ridge Road in Swan Beach, Corolla, North Carolina. I am going to try to be brief. I've taken about half of my speech out because you've heard it, but I think that I build this PowerPoint in a certain way. And what I wanted to touch on was a historical context. As you know, the effective date of the first zoning for Fruitville Township was 1968, and it was residential agriculture. I think Ben Woody has clarified that for us. You can see when in 1969 Osen Associates platted this area, the context was already very residential. From the early 70s onward, federal, state, and local actions deepened the policy orientation for the northern beaches to be even more restrictive. While at the time of the Currituck Plan in 1972, there were visions of little villages accessible only by ferries with golf carts and bicycles as the main means of transport in their village. As a decade unfolded, it became increasingly clear and recognized at the local level that the ideas were not feasible. The county commissioned a report, I believe, in 1979. The finding of that was that there were major development issues, such as the environment, including water, septic and canals, and services and access, which, if the development were not limited, could have a major negative fiscal impact on the county. In the 1980s, several federal and state actions reinforced the need for a more restrictive policy environment towards less growth-inducing development. Access to paved roads was cut off by False Cape State Park. Funding for roads were halted under the Coastal Barrier Resources Act, which basically, as we've heard, blocked federal assistance to the area deemed by the government as unsuitable for development. Wildlife reserves were established. The off-road was singled out because of its high fragile ecosystems. The wild horses were moved to the off-road in 1995 for their protection. Sorry, my animation doesn't show that. And they're now the state horse. The bottom row of this slide shows the history of the off-road ownership of the parcel. Public tax records, which we went through, show that the owner, before it changed hands and after Mr. Friedman's sole ownership, paid residential taxes. As our lawyer said, it may have said business on the piece of paper, just as mine says Section A185, I believe. But the actual assessed property value was assessed as residential. The taxes were residential. We have charts going back to the late 90s. If you would like to see those, I think I can pull those up. In 1995, Ocean Associates dissolved as a corporation. In 1999, the owners of Ocean Associates, Ocean Swan Corporation, and the Friedmans applied for a trustee to liquidate its assets. In 2001, Mr. Friedman took sole ownership of the property in a settlement. In 2003, he had the Northern Platte recombined, closed 2 private roads that had been dedicated to public use, marked off 2 lots of 3 acres each in keeping with the UDO for 2 homes held by Mr. Friedman's granddaughter and partners. The southern property was redrawn into a minor subdivision and listed on the MLS as residential. Successive Board of Commissioners over the decades have reinforced the wisdom of non-commercial residential policies in the northern Outer Banks, from the early land use plans through subsequent ones to the more recent Currituck Goes Green initiative and the 2006 sustainability policy. Their policy recognized the complex issues in very fragile environment that could be destroyed by decisions without foundation. My daddy wanted to be here tonight, so please give me another moment. He couldn't make it because of his health. Y'all remember he came several months ago. He grew up in Northeast North Carolina. He calls Albemarle County his home. Well, it's not county now, but if you got his letter in the mail, he took you through the history. He wrote a speech. He sent it to each of you, and I'm going to read a part of it. There are only a few places left where one can enjoy the natural creation forces around us and observe the order of dependence which exists between the vegetative, animal, and human life. One of those places is located right here. That is the off-road area of Currituck County. Yet there are forces which would destroy this unique situation and the opportunity it affords to preserve the gift given to us by our Creator. Some years ago, I had the opportunity to be in Swan Beach on Easter morning. I awakened almost exactly at dawn. When I did, I saw from my window the sun slowly rising above the ocean. Across the wetlands which separated me from the ocean, there was a stallion leading his family of horses. As they slowly made their way, I noted a flight of birds flying overhead. When I looked on this scene, I remembered the evening before when I'd stood just outside looking up at the beautiful stars in the sky. My view was unobstructed as there were no huge lights in parking places or hotel amusement areas. Lady and gentlemen, we would all hope that when our time is over, we can leave a legacy for future generations. We would hope this to be a lasting one. You folks do have the opportunity to leave such a legacy, that legacy in the preservation of the pristine, unique area just as it is. This is a special legacy you leave your children and your grandchildren, your future generations. It's more valuable than gold, more precious than buildings. The future for many generations lies in your hands. Will you leave this area, as previous boards of commissioners have, as a gift to them? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Deborah Iannucci. Excuse me, I am sorry. I just kill names.
It's Iannucci.
Yeah, please,
Thank you.
If you would give your address for the record, please. Full name and address.
I can't believe I have to follow that. Elizabeth, that was totally unfair. I'm Deborah Iannucci. I'm a property owner at 1685 Sandpiper Road in Swan Beach, Corolla. And to pick up from Elizabeth's plan presentation, from which she deviated, I'd like to call your attention to the bottom left corner of said last slide in Elizabeth's presentation. In your package is a printout of the 2003 recombination plats. I'd like to point out that this more recent plat shows in no uncertain terms that the northernmost property is zoned residential. That same year, the southern tract was subdivided into a minor subdivision, and the zoning designation there also was clearly residential, and it's been for some time, as has been stated several times this evening. An argument that we have heard from Mr. Etheridge is that the words business on the plat designate its use, but the title on the plat is merely for land titling purposes alone, and it carries forward in the records of the county and is a written statement recognized by law as to the definite location of a tract of land by reference to a survey, recorded map, or adjoining property. It does not have anything to do with the use of that tract of land, which is the zoning designation. They're two totally separate issues. The title carries forward year after year, owner after owner, simply for recording purposes, and a plat can be designed with whatsoever words that the petitioner chooses to put on it, whether it be a number or a name, but it in no way implies its allowed use. I would also like to address the current wording that is being used in the most recent request from Mr. Friedman. Unlike in 2010, the rooms at the inn are now being described as land-saving clusters of cottage suites or cottage residential suites. In fact, Mr. Etheridge, in multiple emails to the citizens defending this proposal, has specifically said that this is not a hotel, it's just a few rooms, mixed-use suites, and pretty cottages. The point is that this is a commercial development, and commercial developments are different in their impact than a residential home would be. First, the average occupancy of a hotel room in Currituck is 2.5 persons. So if you use the nearly 300 rooms that they've projected and you do the math on that, you will see at least 750 persons just residing in those rooms. And then when you add in visitors to shopping and restaurants and working in offices and such, you could easily see on any given day an additional 1,100 people in that very small designated area. If you compare that with residential, we're talking about, that's about 900 more people than it would be in the same space for homes. So that's an increase in the population of 80% more people than it would be over residential. It's not the same. It's not a comparable situation. I'm asking if you could imagine if whatever neighborhood that you live in grew by 80%, and what that impact would look like. This does not even consider the daily delivery trucks or other service amenities and vehicles that would have to service that property, nor does it consider the number of cars that would have to travel down Albatross through the hotel complex and out the other side, as Mr. Friedman has envisioned in his plans. Clearly, this would overcrowd Swan Beach, and while the buildings may very well end up to be aesthetically pleasing and pretty to look at, the use as a commercial inn with ancillary shops and restaurants and a store and all the other services is not at all in keeping with the residential character of Swan Beach as it stands now, nor is it in keeping with the zoning as it stands now. The additional impact of this rezoning request is that there would be an enormous disparity between the proposed commercial and the current uses of the adjacent property. Mr. Friedman would be allowed to be permitted to use that property in a way that the rest of us couldn't, as has been said. It would be a sole benefit for that company and not for anyone else there, presumably, unless you're going to also approve other similar requests in the future. There have been long-term Currituck residents in the off-road who proposed businesses via variances to run art shops or ice cream sales on the beach or or maybe lower density type businesses, and those were denied. So why then would we want to approve something that would have yet a higher impact? It just doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Ms. Iannucci a question.
So
If she'll come back to the podium. You said that I was defending this or trying to stress the merits in the letters I sent out to people, emails. Is that what you said?
I don't know. Is that what I said?
I think so. Just so you'll understand, what was the last paragraph in the letter that I sent out? I hope you understand and appreciate, I understand and appreciate your concerns, and thank you for contacting me with them. I hope that you can understand the issues that are before the commissioners, what decisions we have to make, and that's why I asked these questions. I submitted my emails as questions so that I might gain a better insight into what the thinking is of the people that are on either side of it. Please call me if you'd like to discuss it more. So I think it was unfair for you to characterize me as defending the proposal. I'm just trying to ask questions on the other side.
Well, I guess my point wouldn't be to characterize you having a position, but in asking the questions, my answer to those questions are just because something is platted to say business use, as has been stated several times here from our perspective, doesn't mean that that infers a right to that person to go outside the current zoning and the current usage, UDO, in order to have business use for that property.
And I never said it did. I was just asking the question, why?
Okay, are you finished, Mr. Etheridge? Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Mike Long.
Mr. Chairman, could we ask that the air conditioning be cut down? I see a lot of folks look like they're about to fall out.
I think it's turned down on 65.
Is it down all the way? It's plenty warm up here, too, by the way.
Mr. Long, please proceed. If you would state your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Good evening. My name is Mike Long. I own a home at 1437 Ocean Pearl in the Ocean Beach section of Corolla. And I also own a lot at 1703 Hilltop Lane in Swan Beach. Some of you have asked our community a few questions about the difference between a single-family home that might be rented to vacationers and an inn. Please let me respond to your question. First, there is a clear legal difference. Chapter 42A of the North Carolina Code clearly differentiates the Vacation Rental Act from lodging provided under Chapter 72, which regulates inns, hotels, and restaurants. I have to assume that the state recognizes that there is a substantial difference in terms of use and impact. The Vacation Rental Act was designed to address the relationship between the tenant and the landlord, where the ownership of property is leased to the renter, and in the case of rental homes, where certain additional restrictions might be placed on that renter that would not be placed on a longer-term renter. Given the large number of beautiful North Carolina places, the revenue that could be obtained via occupancy tax was also recognized as a bonus, especially when you consider that a residence needs fewer county services than a commercial establishment, and thus the net revenues for the county are greater. So if you wish to equate a rental home to a hotel, inn, or motel, then you need to have the North Carolina state laws changed in Raleigh. Second, have you owned a vacation home? I can tell you that I have, and that it's not a business. It's a way that I can retire and defray some of the cost of insurance, taxes, and upkeep. It is an investment, similar to a 401k. It is something that you hope will appreciate, and that you feel you can use scarce capital, scarce for most at least, to invest for a significant amount of time and get a decent return on that investment. The people who are in business are the property management companies. They make the return. They have very little capital invested in the home. Third, there is reality. A family that comes to rent a vacation home acts like a family. They tend to stay in their home, around their home, or on the beach. They are there for a week. Aside from the trouble from time to time with renters not following the rental rules and over-occupying a house, by and large, these folks treat the home as if it were their own. In a hotel, you can expect a significant churn. They come, they go, they wander. I travel a bit. When I'm in a hotel, in my little room, I want to get out, wander the streets, find something to do. So that is why the hotel has to offer so many services, and restaurants, and bars, and shops. So I can have convenience. I do not want to go to any hotel anywhere and expect to bring my own food. I expect immediate service and convenience. I also use more resources. As some of the next presenters will show, there is empirical evidence on the fact that hotels and inns use more resources than rental homes. And there is the off-road area. At a maximum, we only have 30% of the homes that are rented through the property management companies. So the majority are primary or secondary residences. So as you can see, a rental home is very different than a commercial hotel or inn, both legally and in reality. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have Jane Overstreet. Any questions for this gentleman? Hearing none, Ms. Jane Overstreet. Are you, ma'am?
Thank you. My name is Jane Overstreet, and I have a home at 1677 Hilltop Road, Swan Beach. I have owned the property since 1975, so I've been in this a long time, and when we had a hearing a few years ago, I spoke up about some of the things like you learn to bring your own milk, you learn to bring your bread. You don't go up and down the beach just to be going up and down the beach. But aside from that, I would like to turn to a matter of impact of this proposed rezoning. What is the impact on our small residential neighborhood? This slide shows the property as it is today. The red shows the property boundaries. The wildlife refuge is to the north. There are two 12-bedroom homes built on the property where the 2004 recombination plat carved out these two single-family homes on sites of approximately 3 acres each. Here the petitioner proposes to add to those same lots 4 more 8-bedroom inns. This will bring the total number of inn units on these 6 buildings to 56 hotel rooms. Because if they're going to manage these little 4-bedroom rooms as inns and suites, we can only assume that they're going to do so with the 12 bedrooms that are currently existing. Next, we add the remaining units that are positioned on the ocean front. This would be 190 hotel rooms on 18 acres, plus the 56 hotel rooms on the 6 acres. Then we add the pools, the wellness center, the tennis courts to complete the massive developments on 18 acres. While the summary shows that there are only 7.8 units per acre, the fact is that in this area there would be much higher concentration, stuffed next to the ocean where the erosion rates are very high. But it gets worse. Then we add other hotel rooms and proposed retail space and office buildings to this visual image. Then we add the buildings to the west. The total in just this small area we have grand total of 294 hotel rooms and 19,200 square feet of commercial space. Lots of hotel rooms with significant commercial space. How does this compare to what is currently allowed? A new home on a new subdivision would be required to have approximately 3 acres in a major subdivision. Thus, a maximum of 8 single-family homes might be feasible in this UDO. And frankly, with the conditions of the land to the north, we're not sure that even 8 would be feasible. This rezoning would allow a minimum of 200 more bedrooms than would be feasible with the current UDO or practice in the off-road. The new 23-bedroom home that we hear so much about is on 10 acres. Thus, on nearly the same size parcel, the petitioner would be allowed many times the density in rooms alone. This does not seem reasonable. Plus the 15,000 square feet to 19,000 square feet of commercial space. We have heard a commissioner ask what would be the density if we use the average size platted lots from the 60s. In this comparison, the allowed density is strikingly different from what any other individual could do on an individual lot. Visually, we took the comparable size and superimposed it on a combined graphic. You can see in this. All right, you ready? Yep. All right, so the little blue lot is a typical size lot in that subdivision. Visually, we took the comparable size and superimposed it on a combined graphic. You can see that the 24 room inn would take up the entire 1,500 square foot lot. Or you could have 2 8-bedroom buildings or 4 4-bedroom buildings. I can only imagine what would happen if I went to the inspections department to request this type of density. In fact, I have just now completed my retirement home and my future home that I've been working for and towards for 35 years. I ran into numerous planning issues when I was submitting the house plans, including the fact that I had an existing 350 square foot house with 1 bedroom, and now I was adding 1,900 square feet for a total of approximately 2,300 square feet. To this, I had to write an affidavit that I would not have a kitchen in the downstairs unit, or I would only have 1 kitchen for the entire building, because after all, I would now be having a duplex because it's defined as having the 2 stoves, 2 ovens in the house. And, I see these big 12 bedrooms, 14 bathrooms with multiple wet bars. Yes, maybe they only have 1 kitchen and they're calling them single-family dwellings. That's a stretch. The 23-bedroom house is a stretch. But again, in fairness to all of us that are living there, this density that we put on here of how much the individual buildings would take up on an average lot is without the setbacks, without the required roads that would have to go to each lot, the placement of wells and septic systems. Basically, it would not be possible to have the density as proposed in the hotel when you subtract out all those setbacks, roads, and clearances. Finally, where are all these visitors going to park? Will they park on the beach? We used very conservative parking estimates based on data presented by the parking engineer. Our estimates are that over 427 parking spaces would be required for both the development in the north and to the south, with the vast majority of these being in the northern section, because that's where most of your rooms are. Irrespective of whether or not a trolley might or might not run up and down the beach 24 hours a day, there would still be a minimum of 427 parking spaces, and thus at any given time, at least 427 vehicles coming to and going to and from the hotel at any and all hours of the day and night. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Do you have any questions for me?
Questions? Next, we have Lynn Wilson. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Wilson. I live on 1992 Fort Tier Way in North Swan Beach. Another aspect that we examined were the benefits versus the detriments. And this, is it fair to the community or only to the petitioner? This particular property has a lot of low-lying areas. What would happen if this much density were allowed and then we find out that a large part of this land is not buildable? Would there be a petition to add another story to pack the density in where it is buildable? Worse, what would happen if the low-lying areas on the property were filled? Much of this land currently holds water most of the year. Of course, as you know, according to county stormwater regulations, all stormwater runoff must be contained within the development. Extensive engineering would be required to contain the water within this developed area, and it is not clear to us whether or not this would be successful, much like the people in Mississippi are asking right now as their farms are being flooded. We contend that the fragility of the ecosystem will be challenged and the impact will spread well beyond the boundaries of the petitioner's property. Again, we thought a picture would be worth 1,000 words. This photo is of the proposed building site after a storm. You can see the red outline is where the hotel would be proposed to go. This is a situation of too much water. What about not enough water? Every home in the RO2 relies on a well and a septic system. There are no deep water wells. Our wells are shallow. It is not uncommon for a dry season to result in an insufficient water supply for the entire beach community. Wells run dry, new wells are then dug, but they soon run dry again. The proposed commercial zoning request will require at least 5 times as much water as would residential. Unlike a residential development, whose water use is determined by the number of bedrooms alone, the water use demanded and required of a commercial development is substantially greater. As you can see, there are 5 very heavy uses of water proposed. The amount of water required is excessive and unreasonable. It could draw down the water table with realistic expectations of impacting adjacent properties. Something that we must also point out is that water is essential to maintain healthy ecosystems that protect this barrier island and serve a function for the mainland as well. In addition, its proximity to a wildlife refuge whose existence depends upon water makes the project's demand on water potentially catastrophic. Therefore, the wildlife, the vegetation, and the ecosystems also lose. We would like also to share with the Board of Commissioners the solution to water shortages and wastewater issues that were given to the community years ago by the petitioner's previous lawyer. I don't know if this is the answer today. However, we specifically asked what would happen if, and the answer was, regarding wastewater and water, they would petition, quote, they would petition the county to put in central water and wastewater systems. This is clearly against the UDO and the land use plan and assumes that for the benefit of the development, taxpayers across the county would have to foot the bill. Who benefits? The petitioner and his development? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Questions? Hearing no questions, next we have Kim, JP Perron. I'm sorry. You're up next, Kim.
Hi.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. J.P. Perrin with 2254 Teal Road, Currituck Beach. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to y'all. I'd like to speak from the angle of life safety. I am a volunteer with the Currituck Beach Volunteer Fire Department and a resident of the off-road. Most people in this country live within 10 minutes of a hospital and 5 miles from a fire station. People who come here to an inn or for commercial services will overstretch the ability for our volunteer fire department to be able to serve the population. We understand in your recent budget discussions there is already difficulty with the funding for fire equipment. We also do not have year-round EMS services. Last year we had EMS from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week, June to August. We hear that even this limited service might not be funded in its totality. How can we even start to think about a commercial area? To date, hundreds of thousands of dollars have been extended by fire, EMS, and the U.S. Coast Guard responding to rescue people because they saw the tide coming up and they were afraid their car was going to be washed away in a normal northeast event, which happens all the time. This is the general public that will be coming to the off-road, coming every 2 nights, shifting in, shifting out. As is happening right now at the Hampton Inn in Corolla, the calls skyrocket from accidents to brawls. You can obviously see that putting a commercial area with hotel guests will be different than a family coming to a home and would be a much more significant strain on the system, far more than it can stand. It will cost over $1 million each year to staff a fire station. That burden will come on you, on us. I am a Currituck taxpayer too. So why do we need to pay that kind of expense so that commercial development can be done? As you have heard, there is no infrastructure for commercial activity in this area. This includes no north-south all-weather roads currently planned or feasible. There is limited access determined only by whether you own or operate a four-wheel drive vehicle and the weather. National and local weather service talk about hurricanes, tropical storms, but they do not cover the lunar high tides or extended periods of northeast winds which affect the accessibility of the area. The general public does not understand these geographical factors. Already, guests change weekly. With hotels, you have more frequent change. On average, in Currituck, hotel guests stay 2 nights. Commercial development will increase traffic where children play and adults relax on the beach. The county commissioners are responsible for the life safety of these areas. They cannot put people in harm's way. People will be stranded, lives will be lost, taxes will increase far beyond the ad valorem tax value if you approve this rezoning request. There is an alternative. The UDO already allows development in another way. What's wrong with that? In that way, single-family residence owners will buy property. Those people can be educated and understand the limitations of the area. They are and will be our community and will be part of our volunteer fire station and other efforts. I implore you to deny this ill-conceived request that will threaten the general public's health, safety, and welfare.
Thank you, sir. Kim? Yes, sir. Sir, there's one question for you.
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill.
Fire and rescue, Mr. Idlet and myself have been talking about fire and rescue on the North Beach. What is the plan, or how is the volunteer fire department? This is nothing about commercial. How are you even keeping up with the residential? I mean, I'm telling you, from what I'm hearing tonight is residential's a big problem too. So, what are the fire departments doing to get the required volunteers? Now, when it comes to equipment, the county is funding equipment. I do take exception to that. We have a plan where the fire departments are getting the equipment they need. But the bodies to man the stations and whatever, I'm hearing the residential is a problem too. How are you going to address that?
Can I take a stab at that? I was, and I'll let him certainly answer as well. I was at the fire station on Saturday during a training session. There were at least 40 volunteers there. They had a Nightingale, and as a matter of fact, I asked them when our insignia was going to be put on the side of the aircraft. But anyhow,
good.
But anyhow, they had Nightingale there, and they had at least 40 people were there in a training scenario. So
that's totally opposite of what I was just told in a budget session, that there was a real problem, and now I hear it's not. So I guess somewhere in between lies the truth.
We are very proactive in recruiting volunteers for the fire department.
Okay.
As far as having employed EMS staff on hand, that is another side to a coin that we have, where we have a big issue.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kim. I'm sorry. We'll get you in a second.
Is there a third try?
Third try. 3 strikes.
All right. My name's Kim Hadrava. As of June 3rd, I will be a full-time resident at 1702 Ridge Road, Swan Beach. I'm also an executive board member of the Swan Beach Property Association. We come to you unanimously opposed to the requested change from residential zoning to general business zoning in Swan Beach. As you know, we have provided a letter to the county detailing the rationale for our opposition, and our lawyer and members of our community have summarized many of our concerns. So I thought it might be useful to paint a picture for you of our residential community. Probably much like yours, where hotel, restaurants, and retail shops would dramatically alter, probably ruin, your residential living. From the northern part of Swan Beach south to Seagull, spanning over 3 miles, we only have about 577 lots. Some owners own more than one lot in an effort to increase the space, whether it's to plant a garden or just increase the distance between other homes. There are about 125 homes already built in Swan Beach. The majority of these homes are full-time residents or secondary homes that are not part of the rental program. We don't expect this residential pattern to change. Our homes in Swan Beach have an average of 3 bedrooms. Most of them aren't filled every day, the bedrooms. Usually they're only occupied by 2 people. We've got a few exceptions, 5 or 6 families that have young children. Sure, we have about 14 houses with more than 3 bedrooms, but out of 125, that's really not bad. For those few that do have residential vacation rentals, it's an investment where they use the short summer season to help make their dream come true to be a full-time resident in Currituck. It costs a lot to own a home there. Example, on a $185,000 mortgage, we would pay upwards of $7,000 in flood insurance a year. That doesn't count wind and hail, normal hazard insurance, maintenance, etc. The majority of these few in Swan who have their property in the residential vacation rental market plan to retire there full time. We don't have any accessory uses for home-based businesses in Swan. We've got a heat and air conditioned person, some business owners, a couple of telecommuters, but nothing beyond that. We have a pretty quiet, peaceful community there. So you can see why our property owners are very concerned of the negative impact of this general business and hotel development in our small community. We can't imagine that on any given day, an additional 1,000 people might be parachuted in to stay at a hotel, wander the streets. And on top of that, you're going to add probably another couple of hundred that's going to service that hotel, visit the stores, etc. What a dramatic change from residential to small character. From a planning perspective, it makes absolutely no sense. There is no justifiable rationale nor need for general business in Swan. We purchased this home in 2008, my husband and I, with full intent to move here full time. We have recently sold our company and are in the process of selling our home in Charlotte. And that's why I said, come June 3rd, we will be a full-time resident. If this goes in, it's going to be in my front yard, and we won't. We'll leave. Commercialization already exists throughout the beaches of Currituck County. Residents of Currituck County, their family, friends gather in this remote area to enjoy all of the splendors that come from its remoteness and nature. This will be lost if commercial development is allowed in Swan Beach or any subdivision in the 4x4 area. Not only will residents, property owners in Swan Beach lose, residents throughout the county will lose as well. We are joining with the voices from the mainland, Knott's Island, Corolla, Gibbs Woods, and tourists in declaring our opposition to commercial development in the off-road. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Herbert Curry. And I believe he is with Mr. Simonson, staff there. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Please give your name and address for the record.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Herbert Curry. I reside in Washington, D.C., and I'm here on behalf of the group opposing the petition put forth to the Commissioners today. I'm a senior economist at a major international development organization, one of the preeminent organizations in the world, and I'm also a former business executive. And what I'd like to do today is give you a sense of the economics of what you're looking at in terms of what is a policy decision, which is in actuality a rezoning. That's the question before you. how are you going to contextually change the economics in the area if you decide to rezone? Now, often groups, what they will tell you is that they'll talk about jobs, occupancy rates, property tax receipts, daily visitor spending, and frankly, this language is standard for any developer anywhere. That's been my experience here, around the world. They always tell you the same thing. But the reality is that this proposal would not be a long-term winner for Currituck, whereas leaving it residential will be. Now, at best, this project would only create a few minimum wage service jobs. They're seasonal in nature, and all of you know that. The peak is July. In fact, the same Randall report puts hotel occupancy in December at 13%. So this is something that does need to be considered. These jobs will not be permanent. They're going to be seasonal. There just aren't enough visitors year-round. And in terms of the retail and as you can see in this picture, retail and restaurants, most often in the off-season, the shelves are empty. The selection is reduced. So the benefits really accruing to any community would be null and void. And as I think everyone here stated, there's a reason they moved to this part of the county, and that's because these services don't exist. And we'll go into the zoning issues, why zoning is economically important, a few slides in. As I said, at best, this project's only going to create a few minimum wage service industry jobs, seasonal in nature. In the winter, the stores are going to be closed, shelves are empty. That being said, and if we go to the next slide, why is this? This, I think, tells a very poignant picture or story. Today, with what you have built out, you have 526 customers per commercial acre. Even if you built out every lot, what you would end up with is 458 customers per consumer acre. This is in essence telling you your inventory of commercial real estate, of commercial enterprises, is going to substantially be affected because the number of residents, the number of visitors will actually decrease in terms of the customers per commercial acre. Now, this is bad. And this is affecting people not only will affect people on the paved section of the community, of the county. Additionally, when you talk, this is about employment. This year we're talking about taxes. We're talking about, and this was brought up in the discussion, that it would produce about $500,000, I think, annually in taxes, if I remember correctly. Nielsen and Dorfman have empirical evidence as of 2000 that for every dollar generated in revenue, you increase your cost from anywhere from $1.12 to $2.07 to provide the additional services you would need to cover that development. These costs will not be borne by the petitioner. While it's nice to argue that the petitioner will put in systems that are not allowed under your UDO, to service the development. In fact, over time, what you will see is that the county and thus the taxpayers will have to incur significant costs to protect the health and safety of the general public and to provide the services that would be demanded if you were to put in this type of density. To give you a sense of the idea of the density, the Hampton Inn, I believe, has 194 rooms, and you're talking about a structure of 294 rooms in a residential area. Now, that being said, talking about additional costs to the residents, you're talking about additional cost and impact, a negative economic impact to the taxpayers of Currituck County. You're also reducing the viability of Currituck as a differentiated tourism destination. The county tourism campaigns position the county based on many of the resources that would be threatened with this proposal. You see the comments from tourists, and I've read some of these who visit the area. They come here because precisely there is no commercial development. And why would you put that at risk? Why would you take something that's very differentiated from any other part on the East Coast and ruin it by putting in a substantial hotel development? Evidence in other areas shows that there is a slippery slope when this is done without thought. We could talk about This slide, and Butler speaks to this in 1980, what you talk about is a life cycle in the tourism sector. This is an industry. And with continued development and increasing tourist numbers, this leads to a degradation of natural resources, which what you're trying to protect here, resulting in stagnation and a decrease in the number of visitors. And these graphs, what you'll see is that over the years, yes, you'll get a little peak in business, the business will increase a bit, but because of that unsustainable nature of the development, you're actually going to have negative impacts and a detriment, again, to the well-being, not only of the people in terms of economic value of their property, but also in the well-being and livelihoods of the people on the paved road section. Because remember, you're putting in inventory in excess of what you already need. The dollars there, it's the same number of dollars in the community. You're going to get a lot of people who are going to be hurt by this on the off-road, in the paved road section. Not to mention in the residential area, because zoning, we talked about private property. Why is zoning important? And again, this goes to the economic impact here in the off-road area. It's needed to deal with negative impacts. It's needed to produce efficient development patterns. And if you talk about your long-term tourism programs, this is significant. And it also talks about the need to help deal with impacts of speculative development. Now, we've got a 294-room hotel that's going to be developed if it goes through, if you change the policy, if you change the zoning. What will the impact of that be? And that's why you have zoning. You're protecting other people's property rights. So we can go to the next. So this will give you a sense of what is unique to Currituck County in this part of North Carolina and what's bringing people here. These are examples from other tourist destinations. And this goes, again, back to what I said about Butler. When you overdevelop, you degrade what is in essence the asset you have, what is attracting people to this market. And your tourists are telling you that. The people who come to the off-road area to rent houses are telling you the reason we come and spend our money here is precisely because of the asset base you have. These two examples are very much in tune with people respecting the development, of saying, we understand there's development, but we're going to plan it and we're going to protect and we're going to make it sustainable. And what you found is that they've both increased tourism dollars, they've conserved their environment, and they've limited government service costs. So again, when we talk about that tax base, that's going to be important. The tax impact of less developed real estate is significant. It's not going to be as burdensome on the county, which we all know all the counties are being pressed fiscally to provide services, to provide safety, fire, rescue, all of those issues. So these are two counterfactual examples, if you would, of overextended, unregulated development.
Could we hurry this along a little bit, please?
So,
I'm sorry. We've.
I know it's been a long day. It's been a long day. I can certainly understand that. This is. There we go. We'll just end quickly here. One of the things that I think is that all of you have to consider is the context in which this zoning is being presented. It's being presented as a one-off rezoning option, and we all know that is not exactly what would happen. Once you open this door, what you're going to see is there's going to be greater opportunity for someone to come in and ask for rezoning. And it's going to continue, as you can see by this map. These are just lots that haven't been developed. They're over 20 acres. So we can go to the next one. Again, you start combining lots, and you get even more impetus for people coming in and saying, now it makes sense for me. They got the rezoning. Why shouldn't I get it? I'm just going to combine some more lots. The next thing you know, you're going to have a very substantially different off-road area, and you're going to, the pressures for you to provide roads, all the services that are provided south of here. And it's going to also affect the economic, financial ability of the people who bought homes here. I just want to read something very quickly as to, I just read a study done in Charlotte, North Carolina. So bring it closer to home. This is done by Judd. Its work in North Carolina suggests that the existence of exclusive single-family residential zoning produces a certainty attribute in those zoned areas. Thus, he concludes that the zoning classification is an important property attribute to consumers of residential housing, one which they are willing to pay a considerable premium. So when you're talking about property rights and you're talking about values and who's doing what to whom, you have to be cognizant that there is a reason and an expectation for people to respect and maintain those zoning ordinances. So I certainly appreciate the opportunity to provide some additional information and hope it's helpful as you move to consideration.
We thank you, sir. Is there any questions? Hearing none, take another 5-minute recess if we could. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Next was Mrs. Karen McAlpin, but she stepped out for a second. I'm going to move to the next speaker, Ms. Kelly Peters. Mr. McCree, please, the 3-minute time rule, please start following that for me, please, if we could. Ms. Peters.
Mr. Chairman, board members, and staff, my name is Kelly Peters. I'm a lifelong native and resident of Knott's Island in Currituck County. I'm strongly opposed to the rezoning request that would allow commercial zoning in the four-wheel drive area of the northern Outer Banks. I believe that allowing this type of rezoning will not only negatively impact the way of life our residents currently enjoy, but also believe it would have an adverse impact to the tourists who come to our off-road beaches to vacation. This type of development will ultimately displace the wild horses that are one of the most recognized attractions that we have to offer. A previous Board of Commissioners also saw the impact commercial development and small lot sizes would have on this fragile barrier island, and thank goodness adopted the RO2 district in 1989. The RO2 district allows all property owners to develop their parcels as residential, including those who own what was on the 1969 plat as business. Now those same landowners with business platted parcels can benefit from the value of 3-acre home sites or tourist rentals by using what was platted in the 1960s, while being consistent with the county's effort through the RO2 zonings and UDO to provide for the general public's welfare, safety, and health. So in essence, they are not being prohibited from the use of their property. More recently, the widely consulted land use plan reinforces the good decisions of the previous board. The land use plan adopted in 2006 states the continued development of existing properties in this area, particularly on previously plotted small lots, will add to the inappropriateness of development of this low-lying barrier island. The best means of minimizing adverse impacts is by holding firm on policies against providing infrastructure and commercial services in the area. The policy emphasizes in this land use plan is to allow for very low to medium density residential development without infrastructure or service investments that could stimulate growth and development. In terms of infrastructure, this means no central water and sewer services, public or private, will be approved, and no hard surface roads will be allowed. Further, only services that protect the health, safety, and welfare, i.e. law enforcement, fire, and rescue, will be authorized. Commercial and other convenient services shall not be allowed. The importance of the land use plan cannot be underemphasized, especially in environmentally sensitive areas like the RO2 district of the Barrier Islands. As I remember, in the 2008 campaign, 4 of you campaigned on the fact that the sitting board was not following the land use plan, and during the 2010 campaign, a pledge was made to not support commercial development in this area as well. You now have the opportunity to show your constituents that you will practice what you preach. In closing, I respectfully request that you deny this conditional rezoning request and further the sound decision made by a previous board in keeping this area free of commercial growth and in harmony with the land use plan. More personally, as you can see, I'm very pregnant, about to have my daughter, and I've enjoyed the beach for 37 years all my life, and I wish the same for her, and so that means no commercial. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have Karen McAlpin.
My name is Karen McAlpin, and I live at 1247 Lakeside Court in Corolla, and I'm the director of the Corolla Wild Horse Fund. As our fourth grade speaker, Sarah McClellan, pointed out, Currituck County is now the home of the North Carolina State Horse. On April 7th, I testified before the Congressional Subcommittee on Fisheries, Oceans, Wildlife, and Insular Affairs in support of H.R. 306, the Corolla Wild Horses Protection Act, introduced by Congressman Walter Jones. There are state and federal legislators who feel passionately about protecting our wild horses. I am asking you tonight to do the same. The American public deeply cares about these horses. Over 75,000 visitors come through the door of our Wild Horse Museum annually because they want to learn more about the wild horses. Over 2,500 people have become members because they want to be a part of protecting and preserving them. I am asking you tonight to protect and preserve them. The off-road area is the wild horses' last stand. They were moved there in 1995 because Corolla had become so saturated with development and commercialization that half the herd had been hit by vehicles. There's simply nowhere else left for these horses to go. They've been pushed as far north as they can. The total wild horse population on the Outer Banks has fallen from 5,000 to 6,000 in 1926 to 239 in 2011. That's a loss of over 4,200 horses. Currently, there's only 109 left north of Corolla. The Corolla wild horses are on the critically endangered, nearly extinct breed list. Since I began my position in September of 2006, 4 horses have been hit by vehicles, and that is without a 19,000 square foot commercial development, in addition to a shorter extended stay in, and all of the people who will come as guests, and the people required to provide services for them. Rezoning to allow a commercial development of this magnitude is the beginning of the end for the wild horses. In addition to the enormous assault on their habitat and the tremendous influx of people and vehicles, the precedent will be set for additional requests for conditional rezoning. You've heard all the facts from the previous speakers regarding the land use plan and the UDO. I'm sure you've personally studied and researched these facts both collectively and individually. But public policy cannot be developed without considering public opinion. In this case, public opinion is overwhelmingly opposed to Mr. Friedman's request. The wild horses have survived nearly 5 centuries. They will not survive the collateral effects of commercialization. If they could, there would have been no need to move them to the off-road area in 1995. I speak for them when I say they do not want to be corralled at an inn as spectacles for guests to view. I speak for them when I ask you to deny Mr. Friedman's request and continue to preserve and protect what is most unique about the Currituck Outer Banks, its wild horses and their freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCarthy. We still have about 17 speakers signed up. What I am going to ask, is there anyone here that has any different perspectives or different viewpoints from anything that we have not heard tonight? If so, please raise your hand and I'll recognize you if that would be okay with you folks. And then that way y'all can get back home and we won't be here until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Yes, sir.
I got a different one.
Yes, sir. Please state your name and.
I'm John Howland, 1619 Sandpiper Road in
Yes, sir.
Swan Beach. And can I use this drawing here?
I assume if.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So look at what you got here, right? We got a hotel and a bunch of shops. If we get on the detail.
Please, sir, if you would please go to the microphone.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
He wants to put a corral in a maritime forest and a tower, a bunch of stores, and a hotel. You got Rufus's Hill here, which is you got to get up to get here, which is a good steep, ramp. So we're going to put 400 cars up through here, right? And then we're going to drive down through this residential area to get to the shops that are down here. I happen to live on this road here, and I bought it because it's nice. I don't want to have hundreds of cars going up and back and forth here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who has a different viewpoint or perspective they would like to bring? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward. State your name and address, please.
Well, I want to thank you folks for another late night in Currituck. My name is Lily Button Daniels, and I'm from Wancheese.
I can
And
tell.
our property borders next to what's being proposed.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'd just like to say my piece after having ridden all the way up here.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is this. I don't want y'all's job, because what you've heard tonight is a lot. You've heard from both sides. You've heard facts. You've heard concerns. You've heard how they feel about it. Our family property that I am helped to be a caretaker of, I hold as a trust. And that's how I want you folks tonight to consider this as a community trust. We're asking you to do the right thing for us. What has worked in the past has been a good thing, and we're hoping that you, on the bottom line, will continue to do that, because this is the goodliest land under the sun, and let's keep it that way.
Are there any other speakers who wants to bring a different perspective? Yes, ma'am. Come on, get Janet.
My name is Janet Rose. I live at 212 Pointers Road, Moyock. I do not live on the beaches of Corolla, nor do I live in the four-wheel drive section of Corolla or Corova. I do not do business there. I am simply here as a concerned Currituck County citizen. I am from Knott's Island, and I've been a resident of this county my whole life. I am opposed to any commercial development in Corova or the four-wheel drive section of Corolla. I want you to preserve the character of these beaches so that my children and future generations will be able to enjoy what our beaches have to offer. Our beach is different from other beaches, as I'm sure you all know. We don't have stores there. We don't have roads. Honestly, I don't think we have enough permanent residents to support any retail businesses. And while the four-wheel drive areas of Corolla and Corova are lacking in commercial conveniences, just as Knott's Island is, it does offer some amenities that you won't find elsewhere in our county. We have horses roaming free there. We have views that compare to none. You can drive slowly and not worry about a stoplight. If I remember correctly, about 5 years ago, this county had a group of Currituck citizens who helped develop a land use plan. I have to admit I did not agree with a lot of that plan, but it was adopted. I believe this plan has been followed by such government agencies as CAMA and the Justice Department. Does this proposal that we're discussing tonight follow the guidelines of this land use plan? I know that our planning rules now have time guidelines for developments that are approved. If it's approved today, it does not mean that you can wait indefinitely to do what was approved by our county. Currituck is very fortunate to have Ben Woody on our planning staff, and he's taken a lot of heat tonight from some folks here. He's professional. He doesn't take sides. He bases his recommendations on the rules that some of you put on the books. He is the expert that we hired to look out for our county's best interest, and I urge you to follow his department's recommendations. This project does not fit in with the character of Corova or the four-wheel drive area of Corolla. If it's approved, these beaches as we know them will no longer exist. This approval will open the doors for more approvals of other properties in this area. The tourists who come now and spend money renting the houses each summer would not find our beaches as attractive. They like the isolated feeling. They like no stores and no roads. If we go commercial, we will no longer have the unique charisma that the Currituck beaches now offer. We'll be like all the other beaches. Will the tourist want to come to our beach then? I hope that you will not only consider the revenue that this proposed commercial development may generate, but I want you to consider the revenue that we stand to lose with this proposed commercial development.
Janet, could you wrap up? Your 3 minutes is...
Okay, last sentence. And most importantly, please consider how much the beaches of Corova and the four-wheel drive area of Corolla mean to the citizens of Currituck County. Thank you.
Question. I have a question for Ms. Rose.
Ms. Rose?
I have a question. You don't really have to come back to the podium, though. Are you related to Mr. Woody? Because only his mama talks about him that nice.
No, I'm not.
I just wanted...
I have been to him for other questions as a citizen of Currituck, and he has always helped.
I just wanted to clarify. Okay.
Okay, I think I see one more hand. Yes, ma'am. Please come forward.
Kim Kenyon, 2285 West Swordfish Crescent. Our community has heard this proposal in one way or another for several years. It is time to make a decision. It is time to vote against the request for commercial zoning in the off-road. Please act on this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Anyone else who has a different perspective that would like to be heard? Okay. With that, Mr. Morrison, I will give you a brief rebuttal time, sir.
All right. Thank you. I do not intend to take my 5 minutes, despite the fact I'm sure you wish you could spend more quality time with me this evening. I think I can do it in 2 minutes less. I wanted to address my remarks to Lars's comments. I don't take issue with the sincerity that the other folks spoke. But I stand beside strongly my original point. This is a political decision. Any publication you would read, you will. It makes that very clear. Nobody was under oath. There's no formal introduction of evidence. This is a political decision. Indeed, much of what you do is beyond review of the courts, unless it was to be an issue with you that this was a Virginia LLC. Then, yeah, you can be inviting litigation because they're entitled to full faith and credit. As to the issue as to whether they have their certificate to do business registered with the Secretary of State, they absolutely must do that. It can be remedied in about 30 minutes online by paying $25. You can clearly make it a condition that that be addressed. As to what Laura spent a great deal of time talking about as to whether or not this was spot zoning, you are not set up to rule on that. You're not a court. I could give a lecture to the contrary. But I would point out respectfully to you, we're talking about 37 acres, not an acre or 2 acres. I would also point out to you, perhaps most tellingly, that Mr. Woody, who I don't like you as much as if I was your mama, but you're a pretty good fellow, he didn't, in his analysis, he didn't come up with his spot zoning. I hadn't heard Ike or seen any writings from Ike to the effect of a spot zoning, it would be over. I just commend you to the advice of those folks rather than an advocate. Now, I didn't say one word about filing a lawsuit. I hope I didn't give any intimidation in that way. That was not my purpose. I didn't say anything about selective enforcement, and I didn't say anything about vested rights. I just ask you to do what is fair and to respect private property rights after you carefully balance them against the exercise of your police power, which you must do with regard to the rights of others. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Mrs. Keene, I have some letters here from the Fish and Wildlife Service. Mike Hoff, there's one from Mr. Jack White that were sent personally to me that they wanted to make as part of the record. From Roger Knight, who is an attorney that represents the Fruitville Beach Civic League. Different one. And also Mr. Simonson's letters that he sent to our board. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'm prepared to make a motion. My motion is to
I'm
deny.
prepared to ask a question.
We're going to have a discussion phase in just a second. Who are you asking?
Typically, we get to ask questions before we go to a motion.
We do?
Yes, sir.
We typically make a motion, a second, and have a discussion period, as I understand it.
However you want to do it, Mr. Chairman, I just have a question or two I'd like to ask before we move forward.
Help yourself.
And it goes back to our last meeting. And here's my concern. This is kind of a side issue from this, but it is kind of in the same.
Who's the question addressed to? Can I ask?
Staff.
Okay.
At our last meeting, I asked for a work session to discuss the commercial that's already operating on the North Beach. And I want to make sure that these two issues are not going to get intertwined in the axles after the board makes a decision. The reason I'm asking that is I'm sure there's going to be litigation one way or the other, however the board makes their decision. I'm highly disappointed that we did not have that work session as I asked for it, because I knew this issue was coming forward tonight. And there, I see some folks in the audience that are on that list. And some of the services up there are things that are currently being provided that have to be, that are on that list. One of them is a trash pickup. Just as illegal as anything that can go on. But I want to make sure that these two issues aren't going to get wrapped around the axle after this action is taken, and then we do start addressing those issues, because I don't know if some of these services that are being offered up there, we really need to think about what's going to happen with, I kind of know which way this is going, but we really need to think about what's going to happen when we have to start sorting through those issues. So again, before a motion's made, I just want to express my disappointment that I was not afforded that work session that I asked for last Wednesday at our budget meeting. I did arrive late, but we did have it time to discuss it, and I was not afforded that opportunity, and I just want to express my disappointment. Now you can make your motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question I want to ask Mr. Woody and the county attorney. Mr. Simonson sent a letter last June raising the issue of spot zoning. Was there any concern about that letter, or did you feel the argument was without merit, or what? Either one of you.
Well, I think certainly Mr. Simonson expressed the status of the law in North Carolina very well, the way that it is. But as he walked through the analysis, that's exactly the type of analysis that a court would have to make. I think Mr. Simonson made a very compelling argument. I'm sure Mr. Morrison, as he said, could make a compelling argument on the other side, but I think that's going to be ultimately a decision that a court might have to end up making as to whether, if you were to approve this, it constitutes illegal spot zoning.
Any further questions?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
This is directed to Mr. Woody. In planning for the compliance, ultimately, of what have been interpreted as businesses operating illegally in the RO2 district, and coming up with a comprehensive plan of some sort, which could address that over a period of time, do you feel like your department, aside from this particular action, could take that under advisement and maybe over the course of the next, I think you indicated to me, maybe 6 months or longer, come up with a comprehensive plan which would accommodate the needed services in the RO2 district without necessarily compromising the zoning integrity that already exists there?
Yes, I think there's a process that we could undertake as a community, and we may need additional outside resources to help with that. But I think there's a process that we could go through that may provide some policy alternatives for how to manage growth on the off-road area.
Thank you,
Mr. Rohr. If you
my concern is you've already started the enforcement process. The people I'm looking at in that audience don't have 6 months. You've already started the enforcement process on some people out there that's their livelihood. And you were directed by the board to do it. We know that, the enforcement. But there are some real ramifications to those people and how they're going to continue to earn their living and provide some services that some people need up there. As a matter of fact, this Board of Commissioners approved by the chairman's motion to allow a wild horse tour up there. Is that allowed under the ordinance?
Okay.
It was approved by this board.
What are you speaking about? Wild horse tour?
A wild horse tour that came up here approximately 6 months ago.
Yeah, certainly.
Mr. Bender, is that a allowed usage up there? Because we're making all the other wild horse tours operate out of Corolla.
And Mr. Bender operates out of Corolla, as I understand it.
He was given a special use permit for up there.
But he was given a special use permit for Corova.
What was
I
the-
don't want people to read anything into this that I'm trying to tangle the issues, but we're the ones that's got to unwind all this once it gets wound around the axles. So,
Mr. Woody, out of all the violations that you found in Corova, how many violations or citations or whatever was issued
We sent 9 notices of violation.
out of alleged 27 businesses?
Yeah, we investigated 27 properties.
Okay. So moved. I'm prepared to make a motion.
I can say that with Mr. Bender, the use permit that was granted was for outdoor recreation to launch kayak tours from there. And actually, one of the 9 violations is for another operator that needs to get a use permit. So there are some uses other than just residential that are allowed up there. You can have offices with a use permit, outdoor recreation with a use permit, churches, government facilities. So there's a few other uses beyond residential.
I have a question. Mr. Woody, some of those violations were for just cleaning up. They were for trash and junk.
Yeah, they all had some sort of business component to it. Some of the people in violation were able to come into compliance with the home occupation requirements, but they also had to clean up some debris and trash litter, things like that. There's varying degrees of the violations.
Yes, what I'm saying is I'm just advocating for the people that are trying to earn a living up there. I don't want you shut down. That's all I want you to hear from me tonight.
The mic is off.
I never sounded better than when my mic was off.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, to Mr. Roars, if you remember about 2 months ago, I brought that very issue up and asked that we undertake that type of study.
I just wanted to affirm that Mr. Woody was aware that we're anticipating that he needs to do that, and it could be done.
Well, Mr. Woody and I think we had a conversation a year ago or more, along with Ms. White, myself, about doing a small area plan of that whole area to take a look at how the growth will develop in that area, the resources, natural resources, traffic, this and that and the other. We have a traffic study that's ongoing, and there's things that's being done, and I too agree that we need to do that. With that being said, I'm going to make a motion to deny the amendment due to its inconsistency with the 2006 land use plan, and that the request is not reasonable and not in the public interest and does not promote orderly growth and development. Do I have a second?
I have a second.
I have
A lot of seconds.
we got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I would like to make only a comment that I would like to say to the people who emailed, who called me. Gosh, a lot of you called me, got to talk to you. Ms. Peters, I didn't get to you last night, but I did call you today. I'd like to say, Mr. Morrison, you did an excellent job for your side, and Mr. Simonson, I think your presentation was excellent also. I want to thank each and every one of you here for being active citizens, and I do appreciate it.
I want to say one thing. The people that are here tonight, keep the passion, clean it up, okay? Be just as passionate about protecting your area from commercial development, but be just as passionate about making sure that the lax stuff laying around, the tires and things like this, we've got a staff here. Be passionate about protecting it, okay?
No more discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Okay, let's see. That was item number 5. Item number 6 is consideration of recommendation of award for Maple Commerce Park wastewater treatment plant. Mr. Scanlon.
Mr. Chairman, you have in your package a recommendation by the consulting engineer on the project for a wastewater plant at Maple Commerce Park to serve not only the Commerce Park, but the YMCA and the other facilities in the area. The overall design is for 160,000 gallon per day plant. Phase 1 is for 40,000 gallons. That plant was bid out, and staff is here with the concurrence of the consulting engineer recommending that we award the bid to the lowest bidder, Hatchell Concrete, Inc., in the amount of $1,940,862.20. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Scanlon?
We haven't much money.
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 7, consideration of ordinance amending Section 3-87 of the Code of Ordinances to make it unlawful the feeding of stray cats on any property. Mr. McCree.
This is a request from Animal Control in order to be able to successfully enforce a prohibition on feeding of stray animals, and in particular this is relating to a feral cat situation and problem, particularly in the Grandy area. They have asked that this ordinance be amended to clarify that it is unlawful for an individual to feed a stray on their property or any other property of another within the county without having given notification within 72 hours of the stray animal to Animal Control. They evidently are having cases dismissed in court because defendants are coming in claiming I wasn't feeding them on my property, I'm feeding them behind Food Line in Grandy, for example. So this is commended to you for your consideration and adoption.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
If I have a animal on my property and I feed it, can I be cited?
Not if you within 72 hours notify Animal Control. They then have the option under the ordinance to come out and take possession of the animal and take it to the animal shelter, and then the other processes follow according to the ordinance. Or they can authorize you to remain in possession of the property pending the furtherance of those other processes, such as trying to find the owner of the animal or then any other steps that are to be taken under the ordinance. But you would not be cited just for feeding a stray animal on your property, as long as you make that notification.
All right, another question. Could I perhaps be actually cited if I saw a cat starving to death and refused to feed it? Is that not cruelty to animals?
If it is not yours, if it is not your cat and you are not withholding food from your own animal that you're responsible for, it would not be a violation of our ordinance. You have no legal obligation to feed an animal that is not yours.
Well, my only concern about this, and after some thought about it, is that I feed squirrels and birds every morning. And in the winter sometime, stray fox or a raccoon or possum. And
I inadvertently fed a raccoon last night. Found my trash all over the front yard. So.
We need to call Animal Control and have Commissioner Roy cited. But I do have concerns about that, making it a criminal act to feed some of these starving animals. I really have a problem with doing that.
Let me explain. It's already been prohibited since 1992 in this county.
Okay.
But what this is doing is to clarify that it is unlawful for you to feed a stray animal, whether on your property or on the property of another. But that's been the ordinance for.
Mr. McCree, isn't this in response to like at the food lines and different places where there is actually, I don't know what you call cats, you can't hurt them, but there's
feral cats.
I've been to the food line behind it and seen 10 or 15 cats out there and somebody feeding them, and they're fatter than my cat. And I feed my cat good. These cats and they're just multiplying. And I think that's in response. I don't think it's where we're going to go to Butch's or Mr. Petrie's house and say, you've been feeding that cat and cite him. That is not the intent, is it?
No, that is not the intent at all.
I've received an email, most of you probably did, from Karen Ish related to this about the attempt to capture, neuter, and then return the cats, I guess, which would be involved in I hope the animal control process of doing that. And for that reason, I'd like to hear some more input from this. I know if it does not pass unanimously, it's going to come back again in 2 weeks, and I felt like it would give us enough time to perhaps hear some input and the pros and cons. So I was not planning to vote in favor of this motion, just to give us that time frame to have it studied.
I haven't received that email, but are you saying capture, neuter, and then release them back?
Yeah, evidently that's part of the plan for how they handle them, rather than, you can't do anything with them. You can't keep them in an animal shelter. They'd have to destroy them. So these people, and of course, Ms. Issues with the cat, I forget what the name of the thing is, the one that takes care of all the kitties.
Well, who's going to pay to neuter them?
Well, it's part of a program they have, evidently. I know there's been some grant money available for doing it, but that's what I want to find out, is if there's a legitimate program going on which will get these feral cats under control. I'd like to find out about it. I wasn't really willing to make them citable for pursuing this if it's a better solution to the problem, as is indicated in her letter. That was the only reason I said that.
So
I just don't have enough information.
To continue it, or?
Well, I was going to say, if I vote nay, then it's going to come back in 2 weeks. We've got 2 weeks to do it. I wasn't necessarily going to make a
I think
motion.
we also need to determine if feral cats can be domesticated. There's a whole
We know
school
they
of thought
can't,
that
no.
says they can't.
No,
So
they can't.
why would you
Well, they don't
perpetuate
domesticate
the
them.
problem?
They just want to neuter them, so they quit reproducing.
Well, we know they're down at Food Line. Why didn't Animal Control down there putting their traps out?
'Cause
And I'll just throw that out. I don't really mean to put
Well, that may be the
pressure
case.
on
Yeah,
people.
that may be the case. What
But it
she was
is.
indicating is that the feeding is not aggravating the problem. It's the cats are there anyway. Not neutering them is aggravating the problem.
Okay, is
All
there
I
any
have
further,
to say.
is there any further discussion?
Just for FYI, what is the penalty for feeding a feral cat? What do you think as county attorney? I mean, I know you can't, but what is?
Our ordinance provides that it's a misdemeanor punishable by up to $500 fine and 30 days in jail. Although realistically, a first offense would not garner that type of punishment.
Well, feeding two cats would get you cited twice.
No, but I know it's a group of people in Grandy that, you know.
May I suggest that that you take no action on this tonight, and we'll bring it back at a future date.
I like that.
So moved. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it.
We could always ask former Commissioner Miller.
I'm
his-
talking about that too, but I just. Oh boy, I ain't going there. Item number 8, consideration of ordinance amending section 1-8 of the Code of Ordinances, providing that the penalty for violations of certain sections of Chapter 10 shall be civil penalty only. Mr. McCree, again.
This is a request from the Currituck County Sheriff's Department with regard to a number of violations in the Code of Ordinances that you authorize to be treated as civil penalties and the issuance of civil citations. About 1 year ago, I guess after last summer, they felt like the program or the enforcement of these ordinances benefited greatly from being able to deal with them as civil citations. It also is taking a lot of these types of offenses out of the court system, which we're finding to have problems with them being successfully prosecuted in many instances anyway. So this ordinance will basically decriminalize and provide that the only penalty shall be civil citation for parking in various neighborhoods over in Corolla that are specifically named, the streets that are specifically named in the ordinance, registration plates with expired decals, speed limit violations, careless driving, motor vehicle competitions, that's racing of motor vehicles, destruction of natural features on the beach, blocking the foreshore on the beach, parking and otherwise blocking restricted areas on the beach, and littering as well. Those would be the offenses that would now only be subject to a civil citation rather than a criminal penalty possible.
And you say this is coming forward
This is
from
a
the sheriff's
request from the Currituck County Sheriff's Office.
How do you block the
approval.
foreshore?
I'm sorry?
How do you block the foreshore? I mean, if you're fishing or whatever, I mean, is that considered blocking it?
No, it's blocking with a motor vehicle.
I know what I'm saying is if you back your car up on the beach and fish, is that considered blocking it?
Not if you're parked in the center of the beach.
If you're in the center of the beach, you're
ordinance
okay.
is written.
That's right.
Only if you're parked down at the water level, which now is designated as a driving area. I think that's what they're trying to get a hold of. I guess. I mean, I can only assume, but that's.
And these are already current. Remember, these are current ordinances already in place.
Current or not, it doesn't, you know, I'm just saying, me personally, I think it would be hard to enforce, you know.
But the sheriff knows what they mean.
They enforce it regularly. And
I did make a motion to
there's
approve.
There's a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 9, appointment to the game board. Mr. McCree and Mrs. Keene, I'm going to get you to help me with this. As I see it, we have Mr. Etheridge, Mr. Martin, Mrs. Gilbert have appointments. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to postpone my appointment until the next meeting.
Okay. So moved.
Mr. Chairman, mine shows that I have appointment on June 1st, 2011, which would be next month, so I'd like to go ahead and reappoint Mr. Jimmy Market for his second term.
Okay, Mr. Jimmy Market.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Martin and I are going to do a double switch.
That's fine.
I'm going to reappoint Clay Cartwright for District 4.
Okay.
And I would like to appoint Chandler Sawyer, and he's not aware of that, so I'll call him tomorrow, Chandler.
He'll be a good
I'll take those as a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next, we have appointment to the JCPC board to replace Donald Cooper. This can be anyone from anywhere in the county.
That is correct.
Do we have any nominations?
You do not have any at this time. The JCPC council told me that if you're looking for nominations, they certainly can bring some to you, but you haven't at this time.
How about, if you would, Mr. Scanlon, please make that happen and have a nomination for us, and we'll table that until a future date.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, we do not meet again until September, so we have time to make that appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Are you going to JC?
Yes.
Well, you should bring the appointment forward.
If it comes forward.
If you would, yeah. Okay. Do we need a motion or anything for that? Or is that just
continue it?
Okay, we're going to continue that. We removed item 11. Item 12 is a consent agenda.
Let me go back to item 11, the farmland preservation. I think we must have that committee if we want to qualify for any type of state or federal funding that might come down. I'd like to have that clarified. But that is a board that has to be sitting in place.
Okay. Mr. McCree or Mr. Scanlon, can you look into that for us,
Yes,
please?
sir.
Okay, thank you. Consent agenda, item 12.
Move to approve.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Commissioners report. Mrs. Gilbert.
I just want to thank all the citizens again for the phone calls and concerns and voicing their issues. Just thank you. Keep the calls coming.
Mr. Petrie.
Another learning experience, a good turnout, a lot of passion. I just hope the passion carries over to keep our protected area, and you've heard me say this, God does not make that anymore. We need to protect it, whether you live there or you don't, you need to protect it.
Mr. Rohr.
I concur with that. Keep my point of Mr. Petrie like that liberty carries with it responsibility.
I will. Mr. Martin.
I'd only like to say we heard from Mrs. Tabor and I guess Mr. Sykes on the need for an animal shelter. I'd like to see us find the funding and go ahead and do the planning and break the ground, not wait 3 years. I'd like to see us do that a little quicker, and perhaps we can take it up in the budget when we discuss it again. And I would, with the consent of the other commissioners here, ask the manager if he would look into that and see if he can provide us with the ample funds and everything, find them there, and we've talked about that some way, that we might get this shelter on the road next year maybe.
Mr. Scanlon, the infrastructure issue, I mean, if we had the money in hand today, are we will we be able to do groundbreaking and construction until we get the road processes put in and the infrastructure?
The infrastructure will have to be part of this project. Getting the road to it, wastewater, will be part of the overall project.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could add to what Mr. Martin's saying, we have been told repeatedly by Ms. Sykes and several others that if we would just get them a conceptual plan, some drawings, that they could go out and start getting some grants. I understand about the road. We can't build it till we're ready to build it, but I don't think it would cost a whole lot of money if we went ahead immediately and started getting some plans together to give them something they can run with and start applying for these grants. And they have told us repeatedly they could bring some money to the table. I think we certainly should support as quickly as possible getting them some conceptual drawings so that they can go to the streets and start getting that money. Even before we have the infrastructure, we could at least get that part done.
Do the planning.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Daggett gave us a proposal for conceptual plans and actually working drawings, but phase at a time.
$200 a square foot. He's living in a different universe when Ace Hardware is being built for $75 a square foot. That's one thing we've got to get our arms around, is this per square foot cost of this shelter. That's a whole huge big difference.
Well, I think it points to what we've got to look at length of stay and do some type of 3-4 year commitment with the Animal Lovers Assistance League. Then we can determine the size of the shelter once we get some type of agreement on what is the length of stay and how are we going to handle that.
And I think that absolutely has to be put in there, and that is one of the criteria that they have to meet in order to continue with their ability to operate the shelter. And I think we could do that.
But getting some plans together is not the same as building the shelter. Even if we were ready to build it today, we couldn't start it. But we don't even have the plans ready yet, so certainly we should be able to help to get a document they can use to do some fundraising while we're doing the planning, I guess, is what I would ask. I don't know if that's as much as what Mr. Martin wants or not.
Let me ask Mr. Scanlon, would you like us to have an action item on a future agenda to address those points that were brought up so that we can give you clear direction? And maybe you give us some hints about what you'd like to see before we act on it.
I think what the board needs to look at is, as Mr. Etheridge just mentioned, is you've got a final report from Mr. Daggett. Excuse me. It is driven by length of stay. It drives the size of the building. I would need direction from the Board of Commissioners on what size facility you'd like for him to start master plan. You've seen the cost estimates from a medium-sized shelter to something a little bit larger, and it's a significant difference. We need to give him direction on what size shelter you're looking to talk about building.
Do we need to have a work session on that one afternoon before meeting?
I don't know that we need a work session, because I think we can inquire the state and find out what is an average length of stay across the state and go off of that. I mean,
I think his study told us that. He gave us all that information in the report.
Okay.
I think if we follow his recommendations and build the shelter he recommended, or ask him to plan for that one.
And that was a 13,000 square foot shelter, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think that was the one. That was the small one.
That was the small one.
That was the small one. But that, I believe, included the animal control. 3,000 square feet of that was
Yes, it
animal
does.
control, which doesn't need to be incorporated initially.
Mr. Martin, are you done? You finished?
Yes, I could go along with that. We have those numbers from Mr. Daggett.
Mhm.
Let's use them.
Okay. Mr. Etheridge.
This past Saturday, I attended the Rural Farm Festival down at the Cultural Center. Commissioner Petrie was there also. Saw him and his lovely wife. And I bumped into Mrs. Kane when I first got there, and we were talking, and she asked me what did I think. And I said, this is the beginning of the realization of the vision we had when we bought that facility. And I cannot tell you how many people came up to me, and they estimated over 600 people were there Saturday and told me, y'all did a good thing by doing this. the people at Currituck will be long served. And I'm not patting ourselves on our back, but it just was a good experience to have people tell you that in this day and time. You did well.
Thank you, Mr. Etheridge. Mr. O'Neill?
Well, I'd just like to tell Mr. Etheridge, don't be afraid to pat yourself on the back because you need to pull all them knives out for buying it. This morning, I still got a few scars.
Yeah.
This morning, Commissioner Martin and Gilbert and myself went to a little program at the high school for the junior seniors. It's prom week. And I'd like to really recognize the school as being proactive towards these kids. They're kids. I got a daughter that's a senior this year. But they're being proactive with getting some programs together for these kids to show them the consequences of their choices. And one of the things the speaker, his name was Rick Amato, said over and over again, you're tired of hearing us tell you what to do. We can't make you make choices. You make your choices, but you can't choose your consequences. Right. Every choice that you make has a consequence, and you can't choose the consequences. And he really got to a lot of those kids today. I hung around after he got done, and there was a lot of kids coming up to him and talking to him, and he really touched a lot of those kids today, and it was a great program, and they're going to be having stuff all this week. And I just wanted to commend the school system, the principal and vice principal, Ms. Newbern and Mr. Goins, and of course the school staff for putting that together. So that's it.
I have two. Yes, sir.
Before you do, I want to just say something to Commissioner O'Neill. I actually had 2 or 3 people come up and apologize for throwing those knives at us.
Oh, that was good.
I just have a couple things. Number one, I attended the Project Emmanuel annual awards dinner Saturday night at the Rueton Park at Knights Island. There were approximately 30-some people that were in attendance. There's only like 35, I believe, total membership. Ms. Keene and Ms. Gilbert were kind enough to make up some little certificates of appreciation, and I was able to pass those out. It was amazing of what those folks do. I mean, we have it throughout our county, everywhere, but this thing started in one person's garage one Christmas when some kids did not have some toys. That's where it started, and it's grew into what it has grown into today. I want to thank Mr. Petrie for his support to the Project Emmanuel. They appreciate it, and I appreciate it. With that being said, I have a letter here I would like to read. It was from Kay Hagan, United States Senate, and it was addressed to me, but it's certainly not meant for me. It's meant for this whole entire board. She said, "Dear Mr. Idlett, I'm writing this message to extend my congratulations to you for the recent announcement that the Currituck County and the College of the Albemarle will form a cooperative partnership for the Regional Aviation and Technical Training Center. This collaboration between key regional partners is significant and will surely have a positive impact on the workforce development initiatives of northeastern North Carolina. I have witnessed firsthand the importance of the aviation industry to northeastern North Carolina during a visit to DRS Technologies Incorporated, Elizabeth City location last year. It is important we elevate the potential for the aviation industry in the region and equip community college students with job skills training necessary to be successful at companies like DRS Technology. I know that the collaborative efforts of Currituck County and the College of Albemarle will have a long-lasting benefit to the local economy and the college for years. Once again, I applaud you and your board once again for forging this partnership and wishing you all the best." So I thought that was certainly worth reading. You all deserve a great deal of credit for that, and certainly thank all of you for participating in making this happen. I think we've done a good thing. So, with that being said, manager's report.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Manager, yes, you do. How about what the Chief Glover and them have planned for the high school seniors?
Well, there is an event, I believe it's 10 o'clock this Friday, as Commissioner O'Neill had mentioned, part of the prom week events. Our public safety folks will be working with the school system, and they have a simulated drunk driving event that the students will witness, and our public safety folks, and I believe even Nightingale will be joining them. They're going to put together a coordinated response so the folks can see our public safety team in action, but as part of promoting a responsible prom night and discouraging drinking and driving.
Thank you, sir.
With that being said, no more comments. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.